No Choice. Book 1 in the Kaylid Chronicles. Written by Mel Todd. Narrated by Rebecca Brokaw-Sands. Prologue. Triggered light years away, the wave flowed on its path towards the small planet. The planet cycled in and out of the wave's trajectory as it traveled through space, moving ever closer to the target's orbit. Full of tiny pods, there was no thinking, no intent, only programming. Heedless of anything coming their way, which included the solar flare that erupted and seared across their breath, but radiation caused corruption. Changes in the programming. And as the pods hit the atmosphere of the blue and white planet, most of them had been corrupted, changed, altered from what their creators intended. The pods burned away in the heat of entry, tiny flares so small not even the most powerful telescopes registered them as more than dust, releasing their payloads as they dissolved. Free, the tiny passengers spread out, guided by their existing programming, unaware of how they differed from their original intent. The troposphere welcomed them, and they spread out, but a fraction of their original numbers. Tiny, but packed with information, instructions, and possibilities. They slipped into their targets with every breath. Some died, rejected by their host's biology. Some never found a viable host, and some found the target incompatible. But a fraction, a percentage, found the home they were looking for and invaded, determined to fulfill their mission. Chapter 1. Live on Police.
It's a gorgeous sunny day in the Sacramento Valley. The sun flare that started late yesterday and is still hammering Earth today hasn't impacted anything other than a single satellite. So enjoy your summer, Rossville.
KWAC News Radio Station. Officer McKenna Largo felt the eyes of the camera on her as she walked out of the convenience store. She stopped with her hand on the door of her cruiser. For a second, she closed her eyes, caught in the foreboding that came every time she saw the damn camera. What if something bad happens and they film it and I screw up? What if I have to do something to protect people and it all goes wrong? She shook her head, her ponytail lashing at her. Enough. You will do your job, just like you always have. You've already proven you'll never be like Mom. Hell, at this point, you're 7 years older than she was when she... As always, her thoughts broke off, and she refused to think about her mother anymore. Instead, she worked up her indignation about having a camera crew following her around. The only way to make it through the day would be to get her mood up. Why me? McKenna kept the fake whine in her voice obvious as she slipped back into the patrol car, a bottle of water in each hand. She ignored the smirk from her partner, Joseph Daniel Davidson, known as JD to everyone, as she handed him one of the bottles.
"'Cause you got tits."
His response, sarcastic, and he didn't look at her as he worked on the laptop filing a report from their latest traffic stop. His short brown hair streaked with red from the laptop reflection as he typed, his huge fingers making the keyboard seem dainty. A fidget spinner sat on the dashboard, and she eyed it, wondering if she could toss it out the window before he could stop her. "That qualifies as sexual harassment. I could report you," she pointed out, though she didn't even have enough energy to fake outrage. Between her worry, stress at the damn TV cameras, and the way her body ached, she just wanted a nap. With her luck, she was coming down with the flu. Pushing that aside, she wove her long brown hair into a tight French braid and secured it with a band, tired of getting hit with her hair in a ponytail.
"Then who in the world would you partner with? You really want to be stuck with Gruder or Samuels?"
The amusement in his voice showed his lack of concern, even as he picked up the spinner and started to flick it.
"Don't even think about grabbing this."
How in the world did he notice me looking?
Oh, God, no, she shuddered.
Gruder smoked like a chimney, and nothing was going to make him stop when he only had 2 years left. And Samuels couldn't be quiet for more than 2 minutes. He'd single-handedly ruined 3 stings before they busted him back to patrol.
"Then I think my career is safe,"
JD commented as he looked out the window at the camera crew for police waiting for them.
"Maybe you'll get lucky and we'll go someplace they can't film."
The whirring of the spinner was strangely soothing,
though it normally annoyed her. Like where? They got approval from half the city. McKenna knew her voice had hit full teenage sulk status, and she didn't care. Being the star of an episode of reality TV had never been in any of her career plans. I still don't know why I'm the one they have to film. JD started to answer, but she jabbed a finger at him. And don't say 'cause I'm a girl. He shrugged huge shoulders. Truth hurts. You're pretty, got boobs, and even better, Native American heritage. You're a ratings dream. Besides, you jiggle when you run. I bet it helps their viewer demographics. She could clearly see his smirk and debated shooting him. But he was right. The last thing she wanted to do was get a new partner. Ugh. McKenna slumped against the steering wheel. Oh, as much as you could even think about slumping with a bulletproof vest and all her gear on. I just want to do my job. Why did they make this so complicated? Politics. Smile and bear it. Easy for you to say. They don't focus the camera on you as much. A female cop who's half the size of some suspects is much more interesting than a cop that towers over and outweighs them by 100 pounds. So lose weight, she snarked back, a familiar joke between them. I don't think so. I'm on track to lift 800. Any weight I lose would be muscle, and you know it. JD tapped his firm belly and cast a grin at McKenna. She rolled her eyes, but admitted every pound of him was muscle and bone. All 350 pounds and 6 feet 8 inches. He had to get a special waiver to even be a cop. But the fact that he could ace every test, physical and knowledge, without much effort, went a long way to help justify the waiver. Unlike her, who had more than a few curves she'd give almost anything to get rid of. Fine. All valid points. How much longer do we have as part of this reality TV farce? McKenna knew the numbers, but hearing him say them made them sound shorter than when she replayed them in her head. 3 more shifts of 12 hours, so 36 if we don't include today. Let's not. I'd like to pretend today is already over. She sighed and glanced in the mirror to make sure her makeup hadn't run. She'd been informed if she wore eyeliner and some lipstick, the camera would not wash her out as much. McKenna hated wearing makeup on the job. Hazel eyes with dark green eyeliner peered back at her with narrowed annoyance. This whole thing sucks. But if I refuse, I'll fail. I refuse to fail. I'm not a quitter, no matter what they thought. JD started to reply as the radio crackled and pulled her from her thoughts.
RVH-11, we have a code 211S from First Central Bank. You are the closest unit. Please respond.
McKenna growled at the radio. H was created just for them. For Hollywood. She hated it with a passion, but none of that changed anything. Besides, it had been made very clear to her by the captain, no less, that her opinion didn't matter. She would do her job, and even smile while she did it. Or maybe bare her teeth. That might be more accurate. RVH-11, code 1, she acknowledged and buckled in even as she flipped on the lights. She turned them on earlier than she would have under normal circumstances. But it had been made very clear she could not lose the camera crew of police when they took calls. With quick keystrokes, she pulled up the address on the GPS, glanced to see that JD had buckled in and that the film guys had at least gotten in their van. With that, she tore out of the parking lot, hoping maybe they'd get a flat tire or something. I never have that type of luck. The good kind. Silent alarm from a bank is not a good thing, you know, JD remarked as he checked his equipment, ignoring the weaving of the squad car with practiced ease. Silent alarms almost never are, but it should make the rest of the shift go fast, right? If we don't get killed. His voice remained dry, even as the car tore around a corner. Lights and siren creating a familiar soundtrack. One she loved. JD snorted, and she glanced at him sideways. JD was a great guy, like her brother. He had become her best friend. Family, almost. Though she would have denied it if anyone asked. Family made you vulnerable. They had kissed once, and that was enough to convince both of them that they were siblings from different mothers. He would have been a great catch, though. Smart, fit, good career. And all the stupid women he fell for couldn't see past his downright homely mug. There really wasn't any justice in the universe. 1 mile out. His voice calm as they hit that marker. McKenna flipped off the siren and continued with the lights still flashing.
Next block.
JD's voice, her anchor as he called out the distance. The lights flipped off as they pulled up to the sidewalk across from the bank. See anything? Her gaze darted around, taking in the few people looking at them curiously as they walked down the street. There was no screaming. No one seemed out of place, and it seemed normal.
Sedan. 2-door, dark red, parked on the side street, idling. No driver.
She glanced to where JD pointed, and her eyes narrowed. I see it. Getaway vehicle?
Most likely.
She mentally acknowledged the camera crew coming to a screeching halt behind them, and scrambling out of the van, cameras at the ready. We still don't know anything. I'll call for backup. Then maybe we can casually walk up and see if it is all just a false alarm?
Yup. I'll get out and scope and see if that causes any reactions.
McKenna snorted. Sometimes just having JD appear could cause some of the idiots they dealt with on a regular basis decide to cooperate. Central, RVH-11 at location. No activity. Calling for backup while we get out and check.
10-4, RVH-11, units 10 minutes out.
Damn. What else is going on? That backup is 10 out. McKenna shook her head, blinking at the wave of dizziness that followed that. Getting sick right now would just not be good. Suck it up and do your damn job. You can be sick later. She slipped out of the car, looking around, hand on the grip of her weapon. I'm going to approach the bank, see if there's any activity. I'll cover. With a brisk nod, she glanced both ways and walked across the street, trying to make it casual, though a few people paused to watch her walk, their steps slowing as she approached the bank. Her eyes took in everything, and the only thing that seemed out of place was the idling car, which, while unusual, people were still stupid and left idling cars if they thought it would only be a minute. And that no one had walked out of the bank since they arrived. Tuesday, 11:30 in the morning, there should be people doing things on their lunch hour. The sound of the glass door shattering kicked off an automatic reaction, and she dove behind a car, her movement swift and sure. She came up holding her pistol, a Smith & Wesson M&P 9, aimed at the building. She saw a man standing between the now shattered double glass doors, with what looked like an AK-47 in his hands, though from the quick glance it might have been an AR-15. Another round of bullets hit the side of the car she was hiding behind. Damn it. What the hell did I walk into? Central, RVH-11, 998, one perp so far. Unknown subjects, need backup. She rattled off the code for shots fired and needing assistance, but the dispatcher was slow to respond. A delay that sent more chills up her spine.
Roger, RVH-11, backup delayed.
What the hell? None of this made sense. But McKenna would be damned if odd things made her not do her job. She refused to be the weak link in the blue line, no matter how much she wanted that backup. Lifting her head, she took a cautious peek over the car. This is the Rossville Police. Please put down your weapons and come out with your hands up, and no one needs to get hurt. Her voice, loud enough to carry over the silence that reigned in the streets. Most people had scattered when the first shots were fired, though she could see people scurrying out of the corner of her eyes. Wait, is that a film crew? The shooter asked, his voice cracking, and McKenna glanced behind her to see the cameraman risking his life, filming all of this. Bloody morons! Sir, please put down your weapons and no one needs to get hurt. Hey guys, they're filming us! We're gonna be famous! He called back into the bank, which if nothing else verified she had more than one idiot to deal with. The desire to beat her head against the pavement in frustration surged higher than ever, matching the wave of nausea that she had to fight to swallow back. A glance to her right showed JD coming up low towards her, using the cars and angles of the buildings to hide his presence. She nodded in appreciation, even as she racked her brain for how to control this before anyone got hurt. He's got at least 2 other people in there, and figure it's now a hostage situation. Joy. The bank window blinds, which previously had been closed, blocking any visibility, opened, and she saw 2 other men, both in balaclavas, peer out. She could see at least 4 adults sitting on the floor in the bank, one a woman with 2 kids huddled next to her. 3 people all stood, their hands raised high above their head behind the teller desks. Oh, shit. Kids. Hey, fat pig bitch, stand up and come over here! The man in the door yelled, his voice rising and falling oddly. I am not fat. McKenna's mental voice was cranky at that slap. Yes, she had curves, but she met all the physical requirements tests. She just put on weight without trying.
I'm sorry, sir, I can't do that. But if you put down your weapons and come out, I can guarantee that it will help your case with the courts.
She didn't stick her head up too high above the car when she called out. No reason to provide the suspects an opportunity for a headshot.
You okay? They hit you?
JD's whisper at her ear almost caused a squeak, but she fought it back. Appearances were everything. How the hell does a man that large move that quietly? Yeah, they must have been aiming high, 'cause I didn't get hit. And if they had any abilities, they could have killed me.
Where's backup?
I don't know. Dispatch said they were delayed. The dispatcher is slow and sounds off. I think for right now we're on our own. JD frowned and cast a look up at the sky above and behind us, then shrugged. What was that for?
Figured I'd see if I saw any bombs going off, mushroom clouds, stuff like that. Don't see it, so let's just figure Murphy's Law is kicked in full force.
McKenna's mouth went dry and she scanned the skies too, but they remained blissfully bright and sunny. The brilliant blue sky almost obscene compared to the stress ratcheting through her body. The scream of a child wrenched her attention back to the door where the gunman had stepped out, holding one of the two kids against his chest, having switched out for what looked like a 9mm Glock.
Get your piggy ass out here or I cap the kid.
Damn it, I can't let that happen. I can't. She didn't want kids. They terrified her. But she remembered all too well being one, with no power, no ability to get adults to listen, and letting them get hurt wasn't an option.
There's no way either of us can take a shot, not from here, without risking the kid. Sniper on the roof, yes, but our angle sucks.
JD's voice was icy calm. He snapped into a zen state whenever shit went down, though later he'd throw a fit. McKenna had been there for one or two of them. They were worse when kids were involved. But then, so were hers. Cover me. Her voice had slipped into a flat tone as she prepared to do whatever needed to be done.
I'm coming out.
McKenna stood slowly from the cover of the car, her gun in front of her. The man grinned, a big, wide grin that she could see even with the balaclavas on. It hid details, but not the methamphetamine-rotted teeth or the wild look in his eyes. Meth users, McKenna muttered, directing her voice towards JD, and he cringed as he caught her words. It meant dangerous and unpredictable. She refocused on the man.
Let the kid go. We can get you help.
Drop the gun, or I see if Kitty here can live without an intact brain.
The man snarled, his entire body jittery with either the drug or the need for the drug. Okay. She bent down slowly and put the gun on the ground, kicking it back towards JD, who still hid behind the car. If they were very lucky, maybe the bad guy didn't know about him being there.
Strip!
The voice was harsh, and the kid whimpered as the bad guy held the child tight, hand wrapped around the kid's throat to help keep control. McKenna blinked and looked at him. What?
You heard me. Get rid of all that cop crap. The belt, vest, pants.
He paused as if listening to something.
I want to make sure you aren't wired. If you're naked, then I can make sure. Plus, if I decide to put a bullet in you, I don't need to worry about no vest.
Joy. A moron and a paranoid pervert. McKenna shrugged and started to strip, slowly. She took the time to fold her uniform and lay it on the ground in a neat pile. Every minute she delayed gave her backup time to get here. And being naked on TV, her mind stuttered a bit as she glanced at the crew. Sure enough, they were obviously filming, though most of them were hiding. With a mental growl, she had to force herself to continue stripping. She unstrapped her holdout piece, located at her ankle, laying it on the top of the pile of clothing, stalling as much as she could. Great. Every bit of fat, cellulite, and stretch mark I have is going to be on TV for the world to see. I'll never get laid again. The dark humor kept her moving, even as she reflected that of course today would be the day she had worn her comfortable, functional undergarments, beige bra, worn and stretched out a bit, and the microfiber gray panties that were comfortable with no lines, but created negative effects to any sex appeal. Being without any weapons at all made her more uncomfortable than she would have been stark naked. The waves of dizziness weren't helping either. Damn it, I don't have time for this. She pushed the vertigo down and instead focused on the kid and the idiot holding the child.
Oh, maybe you aren't such a fat pig after all.
The excitement in his voice was all the more disturbing as he held the child as a human shield.
Why don't you let the kid go and I'll let you touch?
McKenna focused on the man, walking forward slowly. Her eyes darted to the sides to take in the other men, now ogling her also.
I've never hated being a woman more than at this moment.
Her skin all but crawled, but she moved forward, her hands up, and stumbled as the world tilted on its axis.
Hey, pig, no funny stuff!
The man snarled as he stepped back a bit into the bank.
Come on in so we can have some fun with a slut pig.
Keep it together, Kenna. You can get sick as much as you need once backup is here and everyone is safe. Her world narrowed down to walking into the bank. Glad they let her keep her socks on as she crunched through the broken shards of glass. Pieces cut her feet, but not to shreds, as she always wore thick boot socks. McKenna looked for something large enough to use as a weapon, but all the glass had broken into pieces no bigger than her fingernail, or a sheet that was too unwieldy to even think about using. Once fully inside, it felt like her vision narrowed, or started to go gray on the sides. She took in the 3 men, all young. 2 were white, but the third she couldn't tell. He stood too much in the shadow and wore gloves, so she couldn't figure it out. But if any of these idiots were over 25 years old, she'd write all the reports.
Okay, so now why don't you let the kid go? You've got me.
The man blinked and glanced at the kid in his arms, as if surprised to see a person there. The kid had gone deathly still, and only the vivid green eyes locked on her reassured her there had been no harm done.
Oh, yeah, I don't need the rugrat anymore.
And with that, he dropped the kid and lifted the gun, aiming at the child.
No!
McKenna's scream mixed with a scream from the woman she assumed to be the mom, and then everything changed. Her body felt like it had been wreathed in fire, and for a second, she felt like she was being boiled alive. Her vision went black, then came back blurry and odd, but the room reeked with smells that she knew had meaning, though only one she recognized immediately was fear. Her point of view had lowered, and she felt like she was on all fours, but the man in front of her snapped into immediate focus. His wide eyes and trembling hand had the gun pointed at the kid on the ground in front of him. The kid seemed to be grabbing his leg in pain. Everything else in her world ceased to exist. She exploded forward, legs propelling her towards the target and a glimpse of paws with needle-sharp claws leading the way in the front of her vision, as some resistance across her chest snapped, and she noted a piece of fabric falling to the ground. Part of her mind gibbered in terror, but for now she locked it down. Nothing mattered but the kids and the rest of the hostages. You don't hurt civilians. And you protect kids at all costs. With that thought, it was as if her body reacted to an imperative, and she only added the intent she had to do her job. Claws swiped across the man's arm as teeth clenched around his throat and closed with force. Hot, salty blood flooded her mouth, and it tasted good. She wanted to rip and tear, to sate her bloodlust on him, but there was still more prey to deal with. Her jaws opened without actual thought, dropping the dead man. She turned to where the other one, the one in the shadows, had been, and she charged. She heard screaming around her, and the man lifted his gun, aiming it at her. Part of her mind, the part that was sitting back, watching, confused and fascinated, noted he seemed to be Hispanic, and filed it for the report that this would generate. His hands shook so badly that even though he pulled the trigger, the bullets sprayed everywhere, and before he could focus enough to aim, her body had leapt at him, knocking him down, and hind claws ripped through the jacket and t-shirt like it had been tissue paper, ripping open his abdominal cavity even as front claws shredded his chest. The gun dropped from the flailing hands as he grabbed at the organs spilling out of his body and screamed. Dismissing him as no longer a threat, McKenna turned, stalking over to the third gunman, noting another big cat curled around 2 children, its posture defensive but not threatening. Her mind noted this, but focused on the man, his breathing rapid and hands shaking with palsy as she stalked forward, an awareness that she existed in the body of a cat clarified.
I give, don't kill me!
He dropped the gun and fell to the ground in a ball, the scent of urine acrid in her nose. She turned to look at her prey, her kills, and then movement at the window caught her attention. A man with a camera stood there looking at her, eyes wide as the camera panned all over the bank. "Holy shit, I'm gonna get the Pulitzer for photography for this!" The words were a whisper, but she heard them as if he had shouted, and a weird, screaming sound came out of her throat, and the humans in the bank whimpered in terror. The cameraman went even paler, but his hand remained steady as a rock. "Officer Largo, do you remember me? I'm Clay, one of the camera guys for police." The name, the words, caused a cascade effect, and suddenly the different parts of her mind, the animal, the human, and the part that just wanted to freak out, all snapped together, overlapping and merging into a coherent whole. "Oh, holy moly, what just happened?" She turned to look at the jaguar curled around two human children, ears back, glaring at her. But it didn't attack or even hiss. There was a sound from another side, and her head whirled, noting that all the windows had been shot out by the wild shots, and a bear shambled up to the window, remains of a police uniform hanging from it. It huffed at her, and the scent of it wrapped around her. Her mind matched it to J.D. Confused, she blinked. Memories of him working out, the scent of his sweat, the subtle cologne he wore, all combined to scream J.D. layered with bear. A cold chill passed through as she realized what was probably keeping backup away. A large tongue swept out, licking the chops covered in blood, and it tasted good. Her stomach roiled with that knowledge, and she looked at the two dead humans on the ground, and a feeling of dread swept through her. I just killed two people. And Her mind trailed off, and she turned, twisting, looking. And there one of the glass walls was still standing. Moving with silent grace, she padded over and froze, looking at the reflection of a cougar looking back at her. How in the hell do I fill out this report? Chapter 2. WTF. Over.
Breaking news. We're having strange reports of animals being seen across the state. The theory is a zoo lost its animals, and from the sounds of it, one of them found itself in the middle of a bank robbery. We'll have more shortly. But if you see a wild animal, please remember, it's probably more scared of you than you are of it. If you think you are in danger, call the authorities. KWAC radio station.
McKenna sat in the entryway to the bank, J.D. beside her. She watched everything and everyone, growling at anyone that made a move in or out of the bank. The cameraman never quit filming, but he didn't act threatening, so for the most part, McKenna ignored him. The jaguar licked the two kids, but there was maternal action in that, not food, so again, she ignored it. She had to keep control of the scene. At least, that was her excuse for the moment, even as the squirrel part of her brain was running in circles, freaking out. It seemed a valid option. You're a cougar, a freaking cat, and JD is a bear. The hell is going on? Statement, question. And she couldn't answer the question at all, or make the statements not true, no matter how much she really wanted to. The sound of sirens filled the air, and she almost sagged in relief, then growled as a thought hit her. How the hell am I going to convince them I'm me and who JD is? I really don't want to get killed as a wild animal. The urge to flee, to escape, had her rising up, body bristling. But a glance at jaguar wrapped around the siblings halted her in her tracks. This is my damn job, and I'm going to do my job. She snarled and sat back down, tail twitching. She glared at the cameraman, who gulped, but seemed to get it. And he walked out to the front of the bank, putting his back to them, and stood there as the backup came screeching around the corner, lights and sirens creating a cacophony of sound that hurt. Ears laid back, she tried to look non-threatening, but from the reactions of the cops pulling up, she didn't think she succeeded. JD huffed and flopped down on his side, and she had to resist snapping at him with her teeth. Always acted so calm and cool.
Holy shit, there's more animals here.
That comment confirmed her hunch. She didn't know if that was a good or a bad thing.
How the hell do I become human again? I don't want to stay a cat.
The act of thinking the question provided the answer. Information flooding into her brain. She could hear the cameraman talking, but sensation and heat took over, and a weird ripple of pain and resettling flesh, and she stood in front of the bank. Huh. The human sound came out, and she patted her body down, noting she was stark naked. The cameraman had an odd look on his face. He had been talking to the cops, but the camera was trained on her and JD. He swallowed hard, and then hit a button on the camera.
Largo, that you? One of the cops asked.
In the flesh, her voice sharp as she looked around.
Can you get my gym stuff from the trunk of the car? JD's too.
Jeff Simmons gaped at her, not moving.
Did you not understand my request? But you were...
He trailed off, swallowed, and nodded at the bear.
Is that thing safe?
Lord, save me from morons. That thing is JD, and I'd like to see you tell him that to his face.
Oh.
His head bobbed up and down.
Yeah, gym stuff. Got it.
Gun no longer pointing at them, he backed slowly towards their still idling squad car. Mike Romero, an older, heavyset cop standing behind the door of his squad car, looking at the bank and the two of them, spoke.
I will say, I didn't think this was how I'd get to see you naked, Largo.
The normal deadpan voice made her smile and brought a sense of normalcy to her world. Romero had been her first partner when she got the job, and the tease made her feel less awkward. At almost retirement age, his teasing had nothing sexual in it. Another siren came rushing towards them as Simmons approached, bags in hand. Before McKenna could start pulling on her clothes, a car marked with Captain came tearing up to the bank, and her stomach clenched tight. Great. Just what I need. Even in her own head, the sarcasm was dripping from the thought. She pulled out her gym shirt first, pulling it over her head. Captain Greg T. Kirk was a weasel of a man in every sense of the word. Lean-built and wiry, with a sharp face and light brown-colored hair. He always seemed to be looking for a way to get ahead, to make himself the focus of everything. He hated anyone addressing him Captain Kirk, due to the old TV series, and tried to come across as a good old boy. She thought he usually came across as a used car salesman.
Largo, why the hell are you out of uniform?
His bellow came bouncing over the other sounds as the car door slammed and the captain stalked towards her, then froze as JD stood up.
Dear God in heaven, there's a bear behind you!
His voice had risen, and he started to pull his weapon. Still trying to pull on shorts to cover herself, McKenna hopped a bit to the side, blocking his view.
That's JD, so don't shoot. Besides, I'm pretty damn sure your 9mm won't do anything else but piss him off.
At that, JD rose up on his hind legs, which put him at over 8 feet tall, and even McKenna flinched back.
As to the nudity, well, that would be because up until 3 minutes ago, I seem to have been a cat. Well, a cougar, to be exact.
You what?
Captain Greg Kirk stammered as he looked around. His eyes widened, and McKenna figured he must have caught sight of the jaguar in the bank. He took a deep breath and turned to focus on her.
Largo, what the hell is going on here?
His voice cold and calm as he holstered his gun, fully under control.
I have no idea, Captain Kirk. Give me a minute, please.
McKenna was too exhausted and confused to worry about placating the captain. She finished slipping on her sneakers, leaving them untied for the moment, and managed to cross back over to JD, who had dropped back down onto all fours.
Hey, not going to say this will work, but I asked how in the world to become human again, and the answer flooded into me.
Try it? She knew it was weak, damn weak. She didn't have anything else to go on. His massive head tilted one way, then the other. Then heat shimmered from him and his body shifted, flowed, fur pulling back in as bones moved, tilted, skin thinned, and his body changed, leaving a naked JD panting on the sidewalk. McKenna looked at him, her mouth open. She had lived through it, but watching it brought it all in too sharp reality. I'm not sure if that was the most disturbing thing I've ever seen, or the coolest. Her voice sounded hollow, but she swallowed, ignoring the metallic taste in her mouth. He stood, a bit woozy, rising up to his full height. He looked exhausted, and like he'd run a marathon, which means I probably look the same. I'm tossing you to the wolves. Her voice trailed off for a moment as the possibility of that now being a real possibility crossed her mind, and she shook her head. Deal with Kirk before I get fired. I'm going to go talk to the Jaguar. The what? JD slurred a bit as he blinked his eyes, trying to focus, his face pale as he tried to think. Her. McKenna nodded towards the cat in the bank, and all the humans had inched away from her, terror on their faces as their gazes kept drifting back and forth between the black cat and the dead bodies on the floor. I have no idea what I'm doing or what is going on. One foot in front of the other. Protect people, do your job. You can freak out later. Okay, he muttered, and walked towards the captain, who stood there with his jaw open. She watched long enough to see him grab his gym bag and the captain start to make odd sounds out of his mouth, then entered the bank. The smell of blood, rich and coppery, assaulted her, and saliva pooled up in her mouth as it wrapped around her. She had to swallow it down, fighting to not be sick. Not at the smell of blood, but at the intense desire to lick it up, feel the warmth of it flowing down her throat. Not now. I'll deal with that later. She moved over to the Jaguar, who curled up tighter around the two kids who were white and frozen, glaring at her. Jeans lay tattered around her body, and a bra hung oddly off her, making her look a bit ridiculous. One of the kids had light red indentations on the neck. She probably grabbed the kid and pulled it back when I attacked. Smart woman. The Jaguar was stunning. Black with gray cloud marks on it. It would have been the star of any Nat Geo special. As McKenna got closer, the cat hissed at her, trying to back away from her, but not let the kids out of the range of her claws. "Oh God, that animal's going to kill those kids!" A panicked voice screamed, and McKenna flinched, whirling on the woman who was starting to go into hysterics. Her fashionable business suit was splattered with blood, and her face was white as she hyperventilated. "Shut up," McKenna snapped. "Oh, look at it! It's going to kill them!" The woman shrieked, her voice hitting a pitch that felt like a knife in McKenna's ears. That animal is their mother, and right now, I suspect the only person here she is thinking about killing is you. The snarl came out deeper than McKenna intended, and the next words were something she'd never have said in anything approaching normal circumstances. Because right now, I'm really tempted to put you out of my misery, so shut up. The stupid idiot gulped and fell back, quiet and panting. McKenna took a deep breath, trying to get her own emotions under control, and crouched down in front of the Jaguar. Look, I know you're probably terrified and concerned about protecting your kids, but I need you to focus. Think about how to become human again. Hey, it worked for JD. Maybe it will work for her, because I don't know what else to do. The cat hesitated, then closed lids over luminous green eyes. There was again that heat, and her body shifted and moved. And then a woman lay on the floor, long black hair tumbling over her body, and two kids that turned into human leeches as she reverted. "Mommy!" the twins cried, and arms wrapped around her, and the woman reacted the same way, wrapping them tight. She lifted her head to look at McKenna and gave her a shaky smile, with wide eyes that kept darting towards everyone, even as her grip never loosened. "Thanks," her voice whispered as her body shook in reaction. "No prob. I'll see if we've got some clothes for you." The woman nodded, distracted as she checked over the two kids, both shaking, but looking unharmed. She didn't let them out of her arms at all. McKenna rose to her feet and moved about confiscating weapons, and walked back out of the bank as EMTs started to show up. "Largo, get over here," Kirk called as he looked at a now-dressed JD and a cameraman who gestured wildly, though to McKenna's eyes it seemed like a performance. "You can't take my film, you don't have the right!" the man protested. "Police investigation, you can't stop me, you'll get it back after the case is reviewed." "That'll be too late!" But the level of protest just sounded false, and an itch ran down her spine. "Officer Largo, we need to figure out what the hell happened here. Hopefully that video will help. I'm loath to believe what I just saw, but I just saw it." He glanced at the two of them. "I don't know what happened, but for all our sakes, I'm placing you on suspension until this can be investigated. Turn over your weapon when you get to the station. Get out of here. I don't want to see your face until this whole thing has been investigated. You too, Davidson." The captain watched them, his body tense and wary. His eyes kept darting to the bank and the EMTs wheeling 2 bodies out.
Yes, sir. Let me report to Ramirez. I assume he'll be taking over the scene?
McKenna kept her voice polite, though part of her resented losing her case. Still, this wasn't normal.
Yes, make sure you go to the station, file your reports, and turn in your weapon, then you're on suspension. I'll let you know when it's been lifted. Though if this has happened elsewhere, hell, how do I cover an officer-involved killing with claws?
Kirk shot them a half smile, eyes dark, then turned and stalked over to the director of police, who had an odd smile on his face even as he waved his arms.
What just happened? Kenna, we got gassed and all that was in my mind, right?
JD sounded on edge and his hands twitched.
I have no idea, but I'm okay with being sent home. This is crazy. Did you see that?
She broke off and shook her head.
Suspension sounds like the best idea ever.
She fell silent as she picked up her clothes and service weapon, though she tucked her backup weapon in between the pile of clothing.
I can hear you thinking, but what?
I have no idea how to answer IA's questions, and if it happened here, what's happened elsewhere? Neither of them had an answer to that. She got clothes for the mom, brought Romero up to speed, gave her version of events with the phrase, "Then I turned into a cougar." It still had everyone choking. The third suspect was almost catatonic, and her level of caring hit non-existent. Her ability to cope had almost locked up, and she just moved on automatic, refusing to examine the crystal-clear memories of what she did, though the change itself remained out of reach. As she finished up with Romero, the jaguar walked up to her. Well, the woman who had turned into a jaguar. Her face had a gray tinge to it, but she held herself upright with tight muscles, and one hand holding onto each child with white knuckles, though neither child looked like they minded at all. With clothes on, she was a striking woman, dark black hair still in disarray. "I'm Tony Diaz, and I just needed to say thank you, Officer Largo." McKenna shrugged. "I'm not sure what I did to say thanks for. It seemed to have gone sideways in the worst way possible." A dry laugh, just bordering on hysteria, escaped the woman, and she pulled her kids a bit closer, but she gave McKenna a real smile. "True, but you dealt with it with a calm I sure as hell didn't feel, and you got me back to human and prevented anyone from doing something regrettable. You saved my son." She pulled one of the kids even closer to her. "So thanks."
"Not a problem. Take care."
McKenna flashed an almost real smile at both kids, who looked at her with half smiles as their mom pulled them away.
"Let's get back to the station, finish up the paperwork, and enjoy our enforced vacation," JD muttered a bit. "I get that this is an unusual situation, but I hate that we're being punished for something I sure as heck couldn't control."
McKenna shrugged. "Life sucks, we know this. We still need to do our admin stuff and follow the rules." She flashed him a smile. "There is one good thing about all this."
"Oh, really? And what would that be? We turn into dragons next?" JD said as they walked to the squad car. "No more film crew,"
her voice gleeful as they walked to the car. JD chuckled, shaking his head, some tension leaving his body.
"Point. Well, I'm not sure all your video problems are over."
McKenna shrugged. "They aren't following me right now, and I'm going to ignore the fact that they taped me naked. Not like anyone will ever see it."
"Maybe. Come on, I want to get back to the station, get real clothes on, and go home. This day is one for the record books."
Chapter 3. Bigger than a bread box.
911 systems across the nation are reporting a huge influx of calls, and wait times are skyrocketing. Emergency response officials acknowledge that there seems to be an inordinate amount of calls about wild animals. They're asking right now that unless you are in active danger, to lock your doors and stay inside. If by some odd occurrence they are in the house with you, please go to your car and stay there. Then call the authorities. If there is a life-threatening issue, please provide first aid and hold until someone can get with you.
KWAC News. She couldn't argue with that, and they got in the car, pulling out quietly, letting all the other officers deal as they headed back to the station. While the radio was on, they didn't talk or say anything, her mind running around like crazy and just skittering off the reality of what happened today. Her clothes and other possessions were piled neatly on JD's lap. The jangling ring from her phone startled her, and JD had to dig for it, still on her belt in the pile of clothes. He held it up to her, displaying a number she didn't have in her phone, but had the prefix for the station. "Answer it, please."
McKenna Largo's phone.
His voice curious as he put it on speaker.
Davidson, good. Is Officer Largo there too?
A female voice asked, one that sounded vaguely familiar, but that she couldn't place. "I'm here. Who is this?"
Officers, my name is Abigail Thomas. I'm a dispatcher for the 911 system here. I need your help.
Her voice sounded low and whispered, and McKenna shot JD a frown. Officers were never contacted directly by dispatchers. It always came over the radio system. "I don't understand. Why are you calling us?"
I heard about the bank and saw the vid on my phone, but the news is being contested. I've got a domestic where the husband is freaking out, saying his wife turned into a fox, and no one wants to call as there's been a shit ton of weird stuff today. Can you take it, please? I don't have anyone else to send, and you two are the only ones that might understand what's happening at that house right now.
What video? McKenna pushed the question back, trying to figure out exactly what was going on with the world today. Even with every moment crystal clear in her mind, it still seemed unreal.
Please, I'm really scared for him, but since the caller is crazy freaked out and I don't have anyone else to send, I'm worried.
Her voice cracked a bit.
I know I'm breaking every bit of protocol, but something has happened to a lot of people, not just you and Davidson. Please?
McKenna sighed and glanced at JD. He shrugged and flipped on the siren. "Give us the address and names."
Thank you.
Abigail rattled off the street address and name of the caller.
Hurry.
McKenna pushed down on the gas as she headed towards the address. "We can't show up in gym clothes. Where can we get changed?" JD glanced out the window, looking around. "There. AM, PM, you can use the bathroom. My clothes kind of got shredded. I'll let you take the lead." A quick nod. She crossed to the lane needed and pulled in, leaving the lights running. She sprinted to the bathroom, ignoring the looks of staff and customers, and did the fastest change job ever. 2 minutes later, she jumped back in the car and headed towards the address. "I feel like we're going in blind. Kirk will have our heads if he ever finds out." Her voice remained flat as she drove. "Probably, but neither of us could live with something really bad happening if we didn't go either." "True." McKenna shook her head as they pulled up at the house. It looked quiet. But everything today had not been what it seemed, so she placed no trust in it. They emerged from the car, listening carefully, and approached the door. Still not hearing anything that struck her as odd, she knocked, calling out loudly as she did. "Rossville Police? We received a report from this location." There was scrabbling inside. A weird, high-pitched yipping, then the door was pulled open by a man, Asian in heritage, with wide eyes, hair ruffled so badly that it stood up almost straight, and stress lines at the corners of his mouth. "Oh, thank God you're here. The first 2 operators told me they didn't have time for pranks. I don't know what to do. My wife turned into a fox, and that makes no sense. That can't happen. She doesn't even have 9 tails." His voice cracked on that last part, which made no sense to McKenna at all. She focused on the parts that she did understand. "It's okay, sir. May we come in?" Please, please." He stepped back and waved them into the house. "She's in the kitchen. Well, the fox is in the kitchen. I don't know if that's my wife anymore or not." He choked as he said the word, and the amount of pain in that voice made her heart clench. "It's still your wife. I promise." This much, McKenna felt sure about promising. She had never not been her while she was the cougar. Confused and disoriented, yes, but still her. The man bit his lip, but nodded and pointed down a hall. She could see at the end of it a white countertop. "Please stay here, sir." McKenna glanced at JD, question in her gaze. He shook his head and made a walking motion with his fingers. She nodded, figuring he wouldn't have any issue with this, though she had no idea how fast she could shift as she needed to, but she shouldn't need to. Domestics were always dangerous, and she had handled many. She could handle this one also without needing anything besides her training. "What is your wife's name?" "May," he stammered out, then shot them a fast look. "I don't want her hurt. I just want my wife back." "No worries, sir. I have no intention on hurting anyone today. After all, it's just a fox, not a wolf or a cougar like I became." Redirecting her focus to the bit of the kitchen she could see, McKenna walked slowly down it. When she had reached the threshold of that room, she called out softly, remembering how sharp her hearing had been. "May? I'm Officer Largo. I'm here to help. It's okay. I'm going to enter the kitchen now." Her voice remained low, soothing, as she turned the corner and blinked. There in the corner was a red fox with brilliant black-tipped tail and ears. It looked like a normal fox, except that it had to weigh upwards of 100 pounds. Normal foxes rarely got above 30 pounds, and this one, well, if she had run across it any other day, it would have scared the daylights out of her. But given the day she'd lived through, this only surprised her a little. It helped that the fox huddled in the corner, wearing a skirt around her middle, looking terrified, which looked odd on a fox's face. "May, I want you to listen to me. I know this is scary. I really do know." The fox tilted her head, watching McKenna, and she saw the disbelief in the arched brows and laid-back ears. "I changed a few hours ago, but you can change back." The fox froze, complete attention on McKenna. "I want you to think about being May. What it feels like to have fingers and arms, to be able to talk, to stand. Remember what it feels like to be human." With a flick of ears forward and back, the fox closed its eyes tight. "Please let this work." Even though it had twice, she still couldn't believe it was that easy. But in a moment, the fox began to melt, merge, and shift into a woman. In 2 minutes, there was a half-naked woman crouched on the floor, breathing hard. McKenna grabbed a shirt from where it lay on the floor and handed it to her. "May, are you okay?" The woman looked up, her eyes wide, lips trembling. "That didn't just happen? What just happened?" "You changed into a fox, but I don't know why. You should be okay now." McKenna had no idea how to console her or answer those questions. They were the same questions in her head. She rose and walked over to the door. "Your wife is okay. You can come in." The husband rushed in, and his wife started sobbing as she threw herself into his arms. McKenna slipped out of the kitchen and over to JD. "I say we leave. There was no crime. We aren't officially here. And I just want to go home. Station first, but then yeah." McKenna and JD slipped out of the house, headed to the station. They filed their reports in a vacant room, avoiding other officers by unspoken assent, snagged the desk sergeant, turned in the paperwork and the suspension forms, which had been waiting for them in their emails. So nice of Kirk to be so efficient. Getting out of the station took a weight off them, and they stood outside looking at the parking lot. "Fudge. I gotta lift to work today as my oil's getting changed," JD said as he looked at the parking lot, missing his distinctive ride. "Need a ride home?" "Please," JD said. By unspoken consent, neither of them turned on the news radio, preferring to drive in silence. She even flipped her phone to mute, not wanting any more last-minute calls. Might as well enjoy being suspended. "So, I turned into a bear." JD broke the silence as he looked out the window. "Yup, and I turned into a cougar." "And when we turned back, we were naked." "Yup." "You enjoy it?" His tone made it obvious he was trying to lighten the mood. McKenna snorted. "Well, I didn't run screaming. And you've got no room to throw stones. I'm pretty sure every moment of my nudity was filmed." "True, though they probably got my gorgeous ass too." JD flashed her a smile, and she rolled her eyes even though she smiled. McKenna recognized him avoiding as much as she was, because she couldn't think about this. Not yet. She left it at that, let him off at his small house, and then headed to her apartment. McKenna had no desire to have any of the responsibilities of a house owner. Her apartment had everything she needed, which right now was whiskey and quiet. Letting herself in, she dumped all her stuff in a pile on a chair and headed straight for the shower. The hot water washed off the blood, the smell, and made her feel more human. A phrase that had totally different connotations for her now. Dressed in a tank and leggings, she poured herself a tumbler of whiskey and sank down into her chair and stared at the wall. What the hell just happened? Chapter 4. Viral.
The animal sightings we reported earlier have been verified, but no answer is forthcoming from the authorities as to the source of these animals. Speaking of animals, have you seen that video that popped up? The fat cop chick stripping and turning into a big cat? You know it has to be faked. I'm waiting to see what movie it's a trailer for, but I have to admit the best special effects I've ever seen. Maybe Sony got hacked again, and the hackers released parts of the film pretending it was real?
Harvey Klein Radio Show. McKenna's mind didn't find any answers as the whiskey disappeared. None of this made any sense. And even worse, she couldn't seem to focus on it. Her mind kept shying away if she poked at it. Enough. I need to figure this out. She set the tumbler down and stood, pacing across her living room. Fact. I became a cougar. A huge, impossible cougar, but I was me. That was not possible, but it happened on video nonetheless. Therefore, it is possible. The words hung in the quiet room, weighty and solid, and nothing she did could change them. With a sigh, she sank back down. There weren't any answers, and she didn't know if she had just done something to get herself fired, or worse, maybe put in prison. Seeking to avoid any of those thoughts, she gave in and flipped on the TV. The idea of a comedy or something distracting vaguely on her mind. The TV snapped to life on news, and an image of her naked, the explicit bits fuzzed out, jumped out at her from the screen, and she scrambled to unmute the TV. Here again, we see the video record live of a police officer shifting into a huge cat, viciously killing 2 men and then shifting back to a nude state. The video has yet to be verified by our experts, but so far it looks like the real thing. Given the other reports across the U.S. and even into other countries, this could be the first of many such sightings. The White House has remained silent on this issue so far. The news anchor, a man in a starched shirt and dark hair that looked like it had been molded into the updo, fell silent, reading something on his display. I have news that this video has already gone viral, hosted by the police website, and has reached over 1 million views. At this time, the name of the officer hasn't been released yet, but we expect to have her name shortly and hope to reach her for an interview. McKenna hit mute, her mind blank as the video showed her stripping out of her uniform, walking up to the bank, then shifting into a cat and moving faster than she could have believed, leaving 2 men dead as she stalked the third in under a minute. She swallowed hard. The memory of the blood, the thrill of killing the men rushing through her. And she ran to the bathroom, barely making it to the toilet before she threw up, retching mostly red-tinted bile that made it worse as a part of her wanted more blood to run down her throat. Shrinking from violence had never been an issue in her life. Her childhood had ensured that she had no issue fighting for herself. But to almost get aroused at the thought of drinking the blood of another creature was hard to swallow. With trembling fingers, she stood, brushed her teeth, and then headed back out into the living room and started digging for her phone. Why hadn't anyone called her? Her phone, buried under her clothes, she had dropped on a chair as she came in, was flashing missed calls and messages. Oh, damn it. How the hell did I manage to mute it? She scrolled through the missed calls. Most of them were from numbers she didn't know, so she just ignored them. 2 from JD, 1 from the station, and then a text from JD. I'm on my way over. You better be okay. I'm fine, just had phone off. She typed rapidly, but he didn't respond. Crap. He's probably almost here. Her door thudded with heavy blows, and she headed to unlock it with a sigh. JD stood there, tight shirt, utility kilt, and a grim look on his face. Relief flickered across it as she opened the door. Where in the world have you been? Why haven't you answered the phone? McKenna stepped back to let him in. He strode in, familiar with her house, heading towards the fridge for a beer. While she didn't drink the stuff, she usually had some cold for him. His kilt snapped a bit as he moved, but for once she didn't grin or take up the familiar joke of him wearing a skirt and his offer to prove it was a kilt. They fit him, though, making him look more like a warrior than an average person. Neither of us seem to be average anymore. I'm a cat and he's a bear. The thought still caused her brain to hiccup for all that she didn't let it slow her down. The phone got silenced, never heard any of them, mostly just been sitting here thinking. He tilted the beer back and took a long swallow. Come to any conclusions? Outside the fact that this is crazy as hell? No. Well, work wants us, and I suspect you don't have long before you have newsies parked in your parking lot. What? He looked at her the way you look at a particularly stupid animal.
"Kenna, you have watched the TV, right?"
She shrugged. "I just flipped it on, saw the video of me and all my unglory on the news. And they said other people have reported things happening." JD looked at her, took a deep breath, and then in a slow cadence, something that always managed to piss her off when he pulled out his "you're missing the obvious" voice, started to talk. "You've gone viral. You're the first, if not the only, shifter to be captured on film from beginning to end shifting. You killed 2 men, rescued a child, and were naked. You're famous. People are already calling you the shifter queen and rallying around you. Reporters are starving to find out more about you, and people already want everything from you." Her mind locked up again as she tried to process that. But no matter what she did, the information seemed like it would only happen to someone else. Someone beautiful, smart, sexy. Not McKenna Largo. Orphan, beat cop, no one special. This was something she didn't know how to process. So she pushed it aside. It was stuff she'd deal with later. Work? "Yup, better get dressed. The captain wants to see us. He's been blowing up my phone since they couldn't get a hold of you." McKenna rolled her eyes. It's been, 2 hours since we left the scene? We're suspended. I think they'll live. But even as she spoke, she headed back to her bedroom, digging for some clean clothes, something that made her feel good. She pulled on a pair of form-fitting jeans, a bra, and a long-sleeved collared shirt in dark red. The color made her smile. Maybe it would remind them of the blood she'd already spilled today, and the captain at least would calm down a bit. Her nerves were frayed enough she didn't know she could handle him going off on her today. She sat down and pulled on her boots, her tax return splurge leather boots. "JD?" "Yeah?" "If I start to change, you think I'll shred my boots?" There was a pause, and then his voice echoed from the kitchen. "Doubt it. Cougar paws should be smaller than your feet and just slip out." McKenna cast another glance at her boots, then sighed and pulled them on. Walking back into the kitchen, she gave him an evil eye as he put together a sandwich. "If they get shredded, I'm blaming you." "Hey, I didn't cause this. 'Cause really, I would have chosen to turn into something cute and adorable. Not a bear, which is huge and terrifying." Well, it does fit. He cast her a mock glare and tossed a piece of cheese at her. She grabbed it and popped it in her mouth. And her knees almost buckled. The taste of the cheese triggered a wave of hunger she almost couldn't withstand. She turned wide eyes to him and he nodded. "Yeah, first bite does that. I've already cleaned out my fridge. I was actually surprised to see food in yours." It took an effort to not grab the sandwich from him and shove it in her mouth. No, only had some whiskey, and it didn't trigger this." "Here." He handed her the food, and she took a huge bite, for once not caring about the mayo he slathered on it, something she normally despised. Now, she craved every bit of fat and protein she could shove into her mouth. She'd never been a big eater, regardless of what the scale said, but now she couldn't seem to get the food into her mouth fast enough to satisfy the hunger that racked her body. "Here." She looked up from the last bite of food to see JD handing her more. "This should ease the worst of it, but I suggest we stop on the way to the station to get some more food." McKenna didn't reply, just chewed and swallowed, feeling the ravening hunger start to fade. She was still hungry, but it wasn't the overpowering level it had been just minutes ago. The last few bites disappeared into her mouth, and she sighed. "I seem to be asking this nonstop, but what the hell was that?" JD shrugged, working on his own sandwich. "No idea. I came home, showered, and grabbed some chips and a beer, and the second that chip hit my mouth, I almost fell apart. It was like I'd been starving, but unaware of it until food hit my tongue. I cleaned out most of my kitchen. I guess I ate about 6,000 calories, and still that just seemed to blunt the hunger." He finished his food, and McKenna swiped a bottle of water. Thirst also seemed amplified. Part of her just wanted to curl up and wail. But she had learned a long time ago that didn't change anything, so it wasn't worth the effort. "We should get going." "Colonel's chicken on the way?" "Yeah, though I hope this gets under control because otherwise, my food budget's going to break me." McKenna snorted.
That's a bit extreme, don't you think? JD frowned and shrugged. Maybe. Let's go.
The ride in was spent listening to news reports, and nothing she heard made her feel any better. The reports were full of stories about people changing into animals across the U.S. for sure, but that was only what they had heard so far. Most of Europe hadn't woken up yet, so who knew what information would start coming across? Getting 4 large boxes of chicken each, surely that would leave them some to eat when this meeting was over, they headed towards the station. Is it just me, or are the streets really vacant today?
It isn't you,
JD said, his eyes tracking everything as he drove. Usually she made fun of his vehicle, a huge Hummer that didn't know the meaning of gas conservation, but this time she rather appreciated the weight and strength around her. Rossville was a city of about 100,000. It had low crime, high level of active people, and normally she loved its quiet streets and laid-back attitude. But today, she swore she could hear the tension in the air, and the way everyone was looking at other people, as if everyone was an enemy about to pounce. The station, however, was a hive of activity, but everything changed as they parked and walked towards the doors. Male and female officers stopped and looked at both of them, and the looks made her skin crawl. As a woman on the police force, being looked at sexually had quit bugging her years ago. But the looks were a mix of lust, fear, suspicion, and a few of naked greed that just felt wrong in a way she couldn't put her finger on. Do you think they've all seen the video? Her voice a low murmur to JD as they walked in.
Yes.
His tone short, and if anything, it seemed like he was trying to block people from seeing her. Stop it, she snapped, her temper already frayed. I don't need protecting. Let me do my job.
I know, he sounded exasperated, but this isn't your normal job and I'm not protecting you.
Yes, you are. Stop it. I can deal with a few funny looks, and I'm a cop, at least for now, so it is still my job.
Stubborn woman,
he muttered, but backed down. And more people slowed to a stop to watch her as they went through the lobby. Yep, stubborn and capable of doing my job. They entered the office area, and the sergeant gave them a narrow-eyed stare.
Head on in, they're waiting for you in the captain's office.
McKenna arched an eyebrow at him, but headed in anyhow. Most likely it was just their shift supervisor with the captain. It wasn't. Or at least, not only the shift sup. Their shift supervisor, Ann Hollick, an older, heavy-set woman with short brown hair going gray, she sat in a corner, her face carefully neutral. A brisk nod at the two of them as they came in was the extent of her reaction. The unpleasant surprise was Police Chief Thomas Marchant, an older man with steel-gray hair. McKenna hadn't met him outside of 1 or 2 official functions where their entire interaction probably consisted of 10 words each. Having his gray eyes latch onto her as she entered and really see her disconcerted her to a new level. Captain Kirk sat on the edge of his desk, projecting calm confidence, but his gritted teeth gave away his annoyance with the situation. Everyone knew he wanted Marchant's job and would do anything to manipulate his way to it. The joke in the department was he just didn't want to be Captain Kirk, and Chief Kirk had to be better and less fodder for jokes.
Officer Largo, Officer Davidson,
the chief said, his gray eyes not missing a thing.
Thank you for joining us. Please take a seat.
While the words were gracious, the tone and the wave towards the aforementioned seats made it clear it had been an order. Repressing an unusual flare of resentment, McKenna sat. JD did too, but the seat creaked alarmingly as he wedged his bulk into it and smoothed down his kilt. Marchant arched his eyebrow, glancing at the kilt. His mouth opened, then shut, casting a glance at Kirk. JD sighed.
My thighs are huge and most jeans won't fit. I have to have my uniform specially altered so I can fit into them. For off hours, this is more comfortable and easier.
Marchant processed that for a moment, then nodded.
Makes sense. Though that isn't really what we are here to discuss.
He turned his gaze on McKenna, who had to resist the urge to squirm in her seat like a naughty schoolgirl. Annoyed at her own reactions, she sat up straighter and met his look with an arched eyebrow of her own. One corner of his mouth tilted up a bit, and he seemed to recalculate something in his brain.
You have a good record, Officer Largo. Top 10% of your academy class. No complaints against you the entire time you've been on the force. And you've been shortlisted for the detective exam. Both of you.
He nodded at JD, who looked as surprised as she felt.
This situation has taken us a bit by surprise, and the unfortunate incident you were caught in has developed unexpected aspects.
There was anything about this entire situation you expected? Marchant grimaced a bit.
We've had officers filmed doing their job before, and sometimes people have gotten killed. We thought we knew how to deal with that aspect. However, an officer turning into a giant cat and killing 2 people is a bit outside the norm. McKenna choked. A bit? Far outside the norm, Marchant granted. However, well, that is something we're still working on. The truly interesting part is what happened after the police camera crew uploaded that video on a video hosting site. It went viral, and I don't mean locally viral. I mean over 1 billion people have seen that video already.
She felt the blood leave her face and whispered,
1 billion? You mean 1 million, right? No. 1 billion, and it's climbing. Right now you're the hottest thing on the planet. And to be frank, I plan on using your popularity. A few other interested people will try to do the same.
Okay, I really need to start tracking faster. I can't keep being caught flat-footed, but what the hell are you talking about? The words burst out of her mouth, and she didn't even have any guilt at not censoring them. Chapter 5. After Action. Information is filtering in from all over the globe. Reported changes from people in all walks of life, ages, and races. So far, no one has seen a pattern, though there may be a family connection. Right now, most of the focus is on a city in Northern California called Rossville. A police officer, McKenna Largo, was filmed shifting into a cougar. This seems to be the first recorded incident of this happening anywhere. 2 people were killed by her in the form of a cat, and all of it was caught on film. The video has gone viral at this point, and no one has come forth with any proof it is fake. TNN News Channel. Marchant's smile, while not cruel, had a shark's edge to it, and McKenna braced herself for information she really didn't want to hear.
As I'm sure you're aware, this was not a localized incident, and at this point, most countries have reported some form of people shifting into animals. The U.S. seems to have been hit first and the hardest. Data is still being gathered, but right now, you're the poster child for all of this.
There was a lot she could tell he wasn't saying, but for now she just filed it away. Instead, she just nodded for him to continue.
First, we need to deal with the dead men, but given everything that was on camera, and the fact that cameraman was too brave and intelligent,
Kirk choked a bit at that.
For his own good, there is little doubt that bank robber would have killed the boy, so we're good on that. The question is, could you have done something else? Then we need to get this in front of the press. There's a fear issue that's moving like wildfire through the country right now, and the governor has already contacted me, asking that we do something to help assure people that you don't turn into a ravening animal. Unfortunately, the average viewer watching your video, it seems like you attacked for the joy of killing.
I didn't, McKenna protested, the words slipping out before she could think twice about saying anything. A half-smile flickered across Marchant's face.
I didn't really think you did, but can you tell me what happened? We need to hear it.
McKenna swallowed and looked around. Shouldn't I have a lawyer here, my union rep? The police chief paused and shrugged.
Yes and no. This isn't a formal inquiry, and nothing said here is being recorded or can be held against you. Mostly that's because we need to know. How in control are you?
JD shot her a glance, and she shrugged minutely, closing her eyes while she ran over the options. Let's play this safe so that both the police department and I are covered. How fast can you get a lawyer in here for me and a union rep so it can all be on the record? Something odd flickered across the chief's face, and he nodded.
Fast.
He turned to Kirk.
Let's move this to one of the conference rooms. Order some food and drinks while we're at it. Get recording equipment, video, and we'll cover all the bases.
Kirk jumped into action, and Anne stood. Come on, you two. We'll head down there. She didn't say much as she led them to the conference room, only stopping long enough to grab her purse, a few legal pads, and some pens until they were in the room with the door closed. Smart move, McKenna. McKenna wasn't big on needing praise, but Anne's comment lowered her stress a little. She had known it was a gamble, but you never could tell which way to go on something. Thanks. I figured this was a political game, and not having it on record was the bigger risk. You're right. Marchant is a decent man, but he's still in the political game, and Kirk is a better captain than you think. But he gets politics. Watch your step. Here, I've got some makeup and a hairbrush in here. You're going to be taped, so do what you can for some armor. It made sense, and McKenna quickly made use of the products, adding a hint of eyeshadow, some color to her cheeks, and brushed then braided her hair. Even she had to admit she looked more professional with that little bit done, and had the added advantage of making her feel more assured, secure in what and who she was. A cop. And a damn good one at that. In minutes, the rest of their party started to show up. First was a lawyer. She recognized him in a passing-in-the-halls sort of way. The name escaped her, but he always came across as competent. She didn't know much else. Before she could talk to him or anyone else, Shelby Drake, the union rep, walked in. A tiny woman who normally smiled so much McKenna felt buoyed just being in her presence. For once, she seemed serious and just nodded at McKenna. Kirk and Marchant showed up.
Food and drinks will be here in a minute, and the tech is bringing the video equipment. Officer Largo, this is William Jones. He has agreed to represent you today, pro bono. And any further activity will be between you two, or at that time you can get another lawyer should one be needed. Captain Kirk said, actually sounding polite and helpful, which helped to throw her off balance. Officer Largo, it's great to meet you.
William held out his hand and McKenna took it on automatic. He kept his head shaved clean and his skin always reminded her of ground cinnamon. But his most arresting aspect were light brown eyes that seemed to catch everything. Thank you, Mr. Jones. But why are you doing this pro bono? He grinned, flashing nice teeth that she knew he had spent money on. McKenna pushed down the urge to cover her teeth as she talked. She had good teeth, just not perfectly straight and white. Wards of the state got basic dental coverage, not the high-end stuff. Just will, please, and so I can hear the real story. It would take us a bit to settle fees, and I've seen the video, so a few hours free is totally worth it. He flashed that smile again, this time looking a touch sheepish, and she had to laugh. This much at least I get. Very well. Glad to have you here. As they talked, the video tech arrived and set everything up, and by the time she was settled, the video camera pointed at her. They were ready to go.
Officer Largo, I'd like to get started.
McKenna swallowed down the lump in her throat and forced a smile, all too aware of the camera. Lately, it seemed like she was always being filmed. I think since everyone in the room has seen me naked, you can at least call me McKenna. That might help make this less awkward. There was a ripple of laughter and coughs, and more than a few faces flushed a bit. It helped. A little. The captain did the legal stuff, dating and providing the reason for this interview. Anne and JD both sat at the back, watching and providing moral support while McKenna waited, not sure how she was going to answer their questions, when she didn't really know. JD had his spinner out, moving it silently in his hands, and she almost asked for it, just to have something to do to distract from the words. Marchant took the lead, walking her through the call, the hostage situation, and then the demand to strip. She didn't have an issue answering any of that, going through it slowly, knowing everything would match up to the recorded information. Her stomach tightened as they got closer to the key points.
McKenna, we have video that the police took, the dash cam and the bank security feeds. Everything you've said is backed up by multiple cameras, but only the police included sound. The rest don't. And for a lot of the action, the cameraman was too far away to catch the words clearly, so we know that one of the suspects pointed a gun at the child and made a threatening statement. We see your body tearing and moving into the form of a cat. Could you tell us what happened from your point of view?
A deep breath. She wished desperately for whiskey as her mouth formed impossible words. I'd been having waves of dizziness, but I assumed I was just coming down with the flu, so I didn't say anything. Marchant nodded, encouraging her to continue. When he threatened the child, something in me snapped, and I thought I was going to pass out, but my vision came back from an odd angle, and she stumbled over the next part, not really sure how to explain. I was aware of everything, but my actions were more instinctual rather than planned. My body, my cat form, reacted. All of this felt so odd to say, and she had to feel out each word as she said it, all too aware that it probably made her sound like she was lying. I just moved to eliminate the enemy. There was no hesitation, no thought about right or wrong, just the need to protect the child.
What about the other suspect?
His voice remained unthreatening, without any inflections, and at that moment, he earned McKenna voting for him. He pointed a gun and became a threat, so I acted.
Then you approached the third person. Why didn't you eliminate him?
He wasn't a threat. He dropped his weapon and had curled up. I had no need to continue. He smelled weak, scared. Where did that come from? How did I know how he felt?
Oh, why do you say that?
I don't know. McKenna paused and thought. Urine. He'd peed down his leg, and that smell, along with his body language, told me he was no longer a threat.
You acted different when the cameraman spoke. Why?
I became me again. I snapped back into full control. Before, it was like my needs controlled me, but once he called out my name, I had full control again. Marchant exchanged looks with the lawyer and union rep, and she couldn't interpret the meaning.
McKenna, if you change again, would you attack?
She wanted to shout no, of course not, but she bit her lip and finally shrugged, feeling everyone's eyes on her. I don't know. I mean, JD changed and he didn't attack anyone. I'd like to think it was just the situation, but I don't know. Her throat got tight and her eyes burned as she fought for control.
You haven't changed again?
No. All of this only happened, she glanced at the clock, 5 hours ago? I've barely had time to even think about it, much less try again.
Any questions or concerns for anyone?
Shelby spoke up.
I'd like it on the record that she didn't shift of her own free will and that it should be treated as extenuating circumstances, as if she had been gassed. Well, I suspect going forward, if it happens again, there won't be this level of leniency. For the first time, we need to provide a large amount of wiggle room.
I agree. If this does get filed, it should be under the influence without consent. No charges for the attack should happen, and honestly, if she had still had her weapon, both men would be dead, and this would be set up as an officer-involved shooting. Will glanced at the officers. From the information presented in the video, do you have any doubt the finding would be a justified shooting if that was what happened? There was a resounding no from all officers, and McKenna unclenched her shoulders. Marchant actually smiled.
Thank you for your answers, McKenna. I know I'd like to know if you can do this again and at will, but I understand you might not have those answers now. We really need to give a press conference and present a sane officer. Are you ready for that?
No. The answer snapped out, and she saw multiple repressed grins. But I don't have much choice, do I?
Yes. I can't force you, but I'd say your life is going to be easier if you willingly provide an interview versus avoiding them. It will just make them more rabid.
At this rate, I'm never going to get a date. She sighed and stood. Sure, let's get this over with. I've got whiskey waiting at home for me.
Marchant actually laughed. I'll send you a case. After this, you're going to have earned it.
The slightly relaxed feeling she had gained evaporated, and she shot a frantic glance at JD. Facing armed gunmen was one thing, but a horde of reporters? She hadn't trained for this. An officer stuck her head into the conference room. Captain, the reporters are here and they're ready for someone to tell them what's going on.
You're up, Officer Largo.
Kirk almost looked supportive, but then ruined it with a wolfish smile, and she could just see his promotion opportunities in his eyes. JD rose, and every eye in the room automatically shifted to him.
I'll stand behind you, Kenna. Figure I can look like I might shift if they get too pushy. After all, they saw me, too. Hopefully they're wise enough to realize pissing off a bear with human intelligence isn't the smartest thing to do. A snort pulled McKenna's attention to Marchant. They're reporters. Don't expect too much wisdom.
His voice dry. The ripple of laughter through the room didn't do a damn thing to convince her this wasn't going to be the worst thing ever. Trying hard to hold her head up and not run like a scared rabbit, McKenna followed the captain and the chief to what was sure to be her personal version of hell. Chapter 6. Paparazzi. There is no response from the White House today regarding these changes. Most governments are not making any statements at this time, but as more and more reports appear, not all of them are positive. Some crimes are being reported as being done by animals, and some people have changed, but not changed back. People are looking for answers, and Officer Largo's name is being bandied around more and more as she changed back and forth without any issue. So far, all efforts to reach her have failed. TNN News Channel. Stepping outside where the podium had been set up, the noise lashed into her, and she flinched. JD caught her as she stumbled backwards a bit. McKenna noticed he cringed a bit, too. Loud for you, too? Her voice was low, but he seemed to hear her just fine. Yeah, bit much. We really need to talk once this circus is over. Agreed. Officer Largo, over here. The chief had slipped back into formal address here in front of the crowd, and McKenna held on to it, wishing she was in uniform. But it couldn't be helped. The title gave her a bit of armor as she approached the podium, JD close behind her. I'll kick it off. Answer what you can, and I know I'm throwing you to the wolves. He paused at that, wrinkling his nose a bit. An expression that now has a totally different connotation. Don't answer what you don't want, and don't make any comments on departmental policy. Anything about that, just say, it is currently under review. McKenna, I know this isn't fair, but you are the pivot point in a storm that could make apartheid look like a fight between two kindergartners. If we don't start putting a good face on it, it might tear apart this country. If not, the planet. People are scared, and you are the face of this change. All I can ask is do your best, and please don't say anything that means I won't be able to support you. Martin's voice was hard, brutal almost, but she knew where he stood. They were using her as best they could to try and salvage this, but if she made it costly for them, they'd abandon her in a second. So once again, you're a pawn. McKenna shrugged mentally. Life sucked. Then you died. She'd do her job. I'm ready. The lie left lips that were curved in a faked smile. The same one she always used with social workers. The one that made them think she respected them. She had practiced that smile for a very long time. Marchant walked up to the podium and waited for the crowd of reporters to settle down. He introduced himself and then took a deep breath. Officer Largo has experienced a shock today, as have people across the world. As you have surely seen, in the course of her duties, she underwent an unexplained transformation and killed 2 suspects who were threatening civilians. We have reviewed her actions and have found no fault with them at this time. While she is still on suspension pending review, we are expecting a full clear. I will walk through the incident so you understand what happened. He glanced down at his notes and took them through step by step the entire train wreck. McKenna couldn't keep her eyes off the reporters, all holding out recorders or phones, or a few rare ones scribbling something on a notepad as they listened. He wrapped up with the statement again that at this time none of her actions was considered questionable, and she had agreed to answer a few questions for them. Marchant turned and nodded at her, waving towards the podium with his left hand as he stepped back. Steeling herself, she stepped up to the podium, glad her height matched his, so she didn't have to futz with the microphone. My name is Officer McKenna Largo. I will answer a few questions. If I know the blasted answer. The reporters exploded into shouted questions and flashing lights, and she couldn't hide her flinch. It took an effort to prevent her hands from covering her ears. Her fingers dug into the podium, creaking a bit as she focused on staying calm and not running away as fast as she could. That is not my normal reaction. She pushed that thought away and took another centering breath, pasting her fake smile on her face. You there, red shirt. Question? The woman in question popped up to her feet in heels that matched the candy apple color of her blouse. Cindy Smith, sack wasp, did you enjoy turning into a cat? McKenna blinked, but answered slowly, all too aware of the multiple landmines this entire situation created, and the cursed cameraman. I didn't really have time to think about it. I had a job to do, protecting citizens. I adapted to the situation as best I could to do my job. From the frown on the woman's face, she didn't think that was the answer she wanted. But tough cookies. She'd be damned if she handed them ammo. The woman tried to ask another question, but McKenna turned, pointing at a man. Glasses, brown hair. Tony Bard, AP, do you have any desire to continue killing humans? No. The word burst out of McKenna's mouth, and she clamped harder on the podium as she moderated her instant answer. I had, and have, no desire to kill anyone. I did my job the best I could, and in the amount of time, I couldn't figure out another way to react given the tools at my disposal. Desperate to get an easy question, though she didn't know what that would be, she pointed at the next person. Jeff Conroy, Hotwire, will you change for us? Yes, an easy question. The smile on her face almost became real for a moment. I do believe everyone here has seen me naked enough for one day, so no. It seemed safer to make it a joke. If they saw weakness, they would attack. With a deep breath, she looked around for the next person. You, rock band phone guy? The man, who didn't even blush at being called out by his phone case, bounced up, looking at her with bright eyes. Do you think changing into an animal will change anything? McKenna paused, thinking about it, and then finally shrugged. I don't know. I'm sure it will change some things, but I don't know anything at this moment other than I turned into a cougar. Naked. Everyone chuckled at that, and then turned back. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe everyone can do it now. I just don't know, and saying anything else would be misleading. There were nods and lots of scribbling on notepads. You, she said, pointing, almost feeling like she could handle this. Larry Singer, New York Times. Any comment on the terrorist group taking credit for releasing this virus worldwide and exposing the infidel as the beast they really are? McKenna shot a look at her bosses, who both shrugged and looked at her, shaking their heads. Sir, that is the first I've heard. If you have any information about how this was caused, I'm sure we would like to talk to you. She tried to pick out someone else waving at her, but before she could, he shouted out another question. Does that mean you endorse all the websites sprouting up saying you are the shifter queen and asking you to lead them into battle against those that caused this? And what are you planning on doing about all the children and adults that have changed and haven't shifted back, stuck in animal form? McKenna froze, snapping her eyes to the man. Children have shifted? Her mind drifted to the two kids the Jaguar woman had. He smirked back at her. Yup, apparently hit them a bit later. The reports have just started coming in. Looks like you're going to have a bunch of kids in your army, Queenie. You going to declare a jihad? The only thing that prevented McKenna from leaping over the podium and strangling the smarmy idiot with her bare hands was years of putting on a good front. Thank you. I think we're done here, she snarled, and turned to Marchant. It made her relax a tiny bit to see the white line of his lips, but then she saw Kirk's face and almost went back to the reporters. Kirk looked like he'd found the Holy Grail. He glanced at her and then the reporters, and every time he did, his smile grew a fraction wider, and she knew that nothing good was going to come out of that. Inside. Marchant's voice was crisp, and she gladly followed him in, ignoring most of the questions being asked, though she glanced back in astonishment when someone asked what sex with a cat was like. The conference room, rather than seeming like a prison, was a haven from the noise and people, and she sank gratefully into the chair. Everything seemed so loud and bright. She glanced at her fingers and was surprised to see wood splinters in them. Officer Largo, McKenna, you did excellently. Thank you. The governor caught your conference and was most impressed. He asked to see you in the next few days. At this point, She couldn't even flinch. Just nodded. She was exhausted and didn't know why. I think at this point, sir, the best thing is for me to go home. I'm still technically on suspension and I haven't had time to really process this yet.
True, but we are pushing this through. I would expect to be back on active duty by Monday at the latest, and be aware, you probably aren't going back on patrol.
He shot a look at JD.
Either of you.
She wanted to protest, but it was a battle she would fight later.
Yes, sir.
She pushed herself to her feet. The chair next to her creaked as JD did the same. They were waved out, and she headed towards the back door. The reporters weren't allowed into the yard, which was where they had parked, so they should be able to escape. It really bugs me that I feel like we're being hunted. Neither of them spoke on the way to the car, though she caught the glances from people as they passed. Part of her cataloged them: anger, fear, wariness, hope, and relief. She noted them and moved on. Right now, dealing with other people wasn't anything she had the energy or interest to do. The soft thud of the car doors closing out the sounds going on in the parking lot came as an absolute relief, and she sagged in the seat.
Where to?
JD's voice was calm, but she sensed stress laying underneath his tone and manner. Home, please. I just need some time to deal with this. He just nodded and started up his gas guzzler and headed to her haven. As they approached her neighborhood, he muttered softly,
"This isn't good."
"What?" McKenna had been trapped in her own head, running things through, and closed her eyes a few minutes into the drive to reduce distractions. At his words, they flew open, and she saw what had caused his reaction. What? Really? Really?
Warned you. Bite me,
she snapped back as she looked at the news vans, cars, and people clogging up the area in front of her apartment building. God damn it! The curse escaped, and she wanted to snarl. In fact, she did. The sound shocked her, and JD cast her a glance.
So, no home?
No, she muttered.
Can I crash at your house until they get bored?
He snorted.
Sure, but it might take a lot longer for them to get bored than you think.
He sped back up, turning down a road to head towards his place. Maybe, but at least a day so I can get some balance.
No prob, but we're stopping at the store. I've got an idea, but I want to make sure we have food.
McKenna shrugged. Sure. After hitting the store, they headed to JD's house. JD owned a 2-bedroom house, though the second bedroom was occupied by his fitness equipment. The couch was comfortable enough for a short while. They hit the grocery store and stocked up, going heavy on the meats and cheese, though JD threw in some fruit. The bill as they checked out was enough to make McKenna wince and arch an eyebrow at him, but he just shrugged and loaded it into the back of the Hummer. A few minutes later, he pulled up in front of his house, which was blessedly empty of reporters trying to get a story. Groceries put away, they both collapsed in the living room, JD taking his big leather chair while McKenna lay across the couch. So, thoughts? She asked as he looked up at the ceiling, her mind still fighting with this.
I think we should try to change.
What? That had her jackknifing up into a sitting position as she stared at him. Are you crazy? JD rolled his eyes.
No, but we don't know what triggered it in the first place. Don't you want to see if you can control it? Because if you can't, I can see some bad things coming down the road.
Like? McKenna was pretty sure she didn't want to know. JD could go a bit conspiracy theory sometimes, but he did think things through more fully than she did.
If you can't control the change, you can't drive. It would be like epilepsy. Lots of pilots, truckers, etc. would lose jobs. If this was a one-time thing, maybe it won't be such a big deal, but I doubt it. And if it isn't, well, then all of this will disappear quickly.
She wanted to. She really did. But McKenna couldn't dispute what he said. So, how do we do that? I don't need to be naked again. JD laughed and winked at her.
Ah, come on. You don't want me to see you in all your naked glory?
McKenna rolled her eyes this time. Like it does anything for you.
Hey, just because there's no spark at all between us doesn't mean I don't appreciate a naked woman.
Whatever. She flapped her hand at him. So, thoughts? He shrugged. Remember how you changed back? Why don't we try the reverse? I mean, I have no idea here, Kenna, but I'd much rather control this than be controlled by it. And you know that Kirk plans on using you to further his career. Oh, yeah. The greed in his eyes after the press conference cemented that. Okay, let me go strip. I'm not ruining any more clothes. Bras are blasted expensive. Your extra bedroom is now mine. Sounds good. Though, word of advice, don't shut the door all the way. I think trying to open a door with paws might be a bit annoying. Point. She pulled herself off the couch and headed that way. JD followed, angling towards his bedroom. Inside the room, which reeked of sweat and maleness, she closed the door most of the way and glanced at the full-length mirror. Great. I get to watch myself change. But the idea kind of appealed to her. Seeing it on others, and then only having the reflection to see what she changed into, the idea of a real mirror was kind of nice. Though the video had been pretty good, there was still something about a mirror up close that had an attraction. Fighting back nerves, she stripped and stood in front of the mirror, looking to see if there was any visible sign of what she could do. But the woman looking back at her didn't look any different. Long brown hair with the red highlights, hazel eyes, a body with curves and muscles. Nothing great, but nothing awful either. Just a woman starting to hit middle age. You'd think there'd be something visible screaming about what I did or something. But I just see me. A mental sigh, and she closed her eyes for a moment, needing to focus on what she was trying to do. A cat. No, a cougar. I had paws. Everything smelled sharper. I could feel my strength, the instinct on how to hunt. In her mind, McKenna reconstructed what it felt like when she had been the cat, and something clicked. Her body ached, but flowed. She couldn't open her eyes until it was over. The pain less this time. More uncomfortable but brief, like getting her legs waxed. Pain, but by the time you realized it, it was gone. The feeling ebbed away, and she could pull her eyes open. A cougar stared back at her in the mirror. Chapter 7. Animal Magnetism.
There is no doubt anymore our world has changed. The question before us is, are these still people? The people we loved and worked with, or have they become ravening animals and fallen from the light? These questions need to be asked before we risk our children to this depredation.
Pundit on Harvey Klein Talk Show. McKenna sneezed. The odors of the room so strong, information came on the heels of each smell. Male, desperation, sorrow, stale and fresh, the scents surrounded her, but faded into the background as she acknowledged each one. How the hell do I know that this room smells of desperation and sorrow? With a huff, she padded forward towards the mirror and looked at herself. She was not a naturalist by any means, but even from her passing knowledge, she was a huge cougar. Coat had the brown with red highlights like her hair, and her eyes were the same color as her human form. She made a note to do some research on cougars, but for now, she just looked, amazement in her heart. Sleek muscles were everywhere, and she knew how to do things that she had never contemplated. How to hold still until prey passed by. That both creeped her out and excited her. A yawn exposed long, sharp canines, and the memory of sinking them into the throat of the bank robber flashed into her mind, as well as the taste of his blood across her tongue. Lifting up her hand, or paw, she extended and retracted the claws, shuddering internally at the memory of how easily they had cut through flesh. A huff at the door had her spinning, crouched low, tail lashing. It pushed open, and she hissed in reaction, the actions automatic and not anything she chose to do. Similar to a flinch when something came near your eye. You just did unless you consciously fought not to. The door pushed open, and a bear stood there on all fours. Before she had acknowledged it was a bear, she hadn't really paid attention to him. This time, Fighting down a weird desire to flee, she stalked forward, vaguely aware of her tail lashing back and forth as she got closer. His smell, both familiar and strange, reached her, and her mouth opened in a weird motion as she breathed in his scent, committing it to memory. It was JD, but different. Changed. And part of her knew she'd recognize him by scent in either form now. He stood almost a foot taller than her at the shoulder, his fur a darker brown than his hair, but not the black or brown she had seen in pictures of bears. His nose twitched as he craned his head towards her. She fought the urge to back up and allowed him to sniff even as she continued to inspect, part of her mind noting the claws and imagining the damage they could do to someone. To her. Stop it. What the hell is my problem? JD wouldn't hurt me. The mental snarl pushed the thoughts down, but didn't stop them completely. Refusing to let thoughts and instincts she didn't understand drive her, she rubbed her face against him and instantly calmed. Her scent now mixed with his, marking him in a way that she didn't get, but she relaxed. JD shook his head and huffed a bit louder. Damn it. There are some major drawbacks. How the hell do you talk to other people like this, other animals? She tried to see if she could make herself speak, focusing on trying to talk. Her tongue and throat did not cooperate. A weird half sound came out, and JD sat back on his haunches, blinking at her. The peal of the doorbell, followed up by a hard knock, elicited a startled meowing cry out of her. Even JD rose on his hind legs to peer towards the door. Who the hell? She peered around JD to look at the door, but it was solid and didn't give her any clue as to who it was. She glanced at JD and he huffed again and turned away. The knock sounded again, and a familiar voice came through the door. JD, McKenna, I need to talk to you. Anne Hollick's voice came through, and McKenna felt her stomach clench at the sound. With a frustrated growl, she headbutted JD and nudged the door closed in his face. She heard his heavy steps as he headed back to his room. She concentrated, and this time it was easier, and she flowed back into human form. She staggered a bit, trying to regain her balance and reorient herself. Moving fast, she grabbed clothes and pulled them on, not bothering with a bra. McKenna left the room about the same time as JD, both of them a bit disheveled as they moved towards the door. JD pulled it open to flashing bulbs from a man standing on the sidewalk just off his property. Anne's face grimaced. Sorry, I can't stop him. He's on public property. She cast a glance at their disheveled appearance. Did I interrupt something? God damn it, McKenna cussed. Get in here. She wanted to snarl, but fought it down. Glad JD shut the door behind Anne the second she slipped in, even though more flashes occurred as the person snapped pictures. Anne stepped in, looking at them with an arched brow. I didn't think you two were involved. A bit of censure rode in her voice. The urge to snarl, to lash out, rippled through her, and McKenna had to blink to resist the desire to slap Anne across the face, claws out. She glanced at her hand, unsure if she had nails or claws. Clean, short, human nails were attached to the end of her fingers, to mixed relief and disappointment. What the hell is my issue? Why am I so angry? No, you aren't interrupting sex if that's what you're implying. We were seeing if we could change again. Controlling the change this time, JD said, his voice calm but sarcastic. Anne had the grace to flush and nodded her head. JD's calmness annoyed McKenna, and she had to tamp it down again, her stress level rising at how out of kilter her emotional reactions were. She always was in control. She had to be. If you lost control, people could see how to manipulate you. What is going on with my reactions? I like Anne. Why did I want to shred her? Before she could focus on that too much, JD and Anne's words registered in her consciousness. Did that go? Anne asked as JD moved to the kitchen. We changed, but someone pounded on the door before we could do much about it. He cast a sardonic glance at her. At least I didn't figure anything out. Did you, Kenna? Even as he talked, he was pulling out ingredients for sandwiches, creating each on a full baguette, loaded with meat and cheese. He put pieces of fruit in a bowl, and then with a frown, pulled out some honey and peanut butter. An overwhelming hunger swept through her again, and she climbed up on his bar stools, watching the food as he worked. No. maybe? With a force of will, she moved her attention to Anne, even as her nose tracked all the food that was going on the sandwiches. Well, you control the change, so that's good, right? Anne asked, leaning back against the wall. Her brows furrowed slightly as her eyes flicked back and forth between JD and McKenna. I did change, McKenna said slowly. I was fully me, but I didn't have time to figure out much more. But I know too much. You know too much? I thought you didn't know how this happened. Anne's question was a sharp, fast riposte, and McKenna shook her head in frustration. Not what I mean. I'm human. I'm not a big hunter, and while I enjoy cat videos, most of my knowledge of big cats comes from Disney movies. I know only the most general info. So why do I know how to pounce, spring, gut a man with my hind legs, how hard to shake to snap the neck? Why do I know what scents mean and can tell the difference between fear and curiosity? I know too much that is almost as disconcerting as changing into a cat in the first place. She didn't mention that she could smell more now and hear more. That she would talk to JD about later, with no one else involved. I see. Well, not really, but that is interesting. You think the virus is responsible for this? No idea. Heck, do we even know for sure it was a virus? McKenna was distracted by the food JD slid in front of her, and she started to inhale the food, feeling the hunger recede a bit as she ate, not even bothering with trying to talk while she ate. JD slid in next to her and worked on his own meal. Normally, she might have eaten a third of a baguette sandwich and JD maybe a half. Today, they both finished their own sandwiches plus the fruit. And JD had naan that he covered with peanut butter and honey that he started to create after the other food was gone. That didn't even sound good to McKenna, much less smell edible. So she shook her head and refocused on Anne, who stood looking at them with a stunned expression on her face. What? You do realize you probably just inhaled about 4,000 calories, right? McKenna stopped and looked at the remains on her plate, then shot a look at JD. You knew this would happen? It didn't come out as an accusation, more confusion. No, I suspected. He sighed and sagged a bit, the stool creaking alarmingly as he did. JD cast a look at both her and Anne and focused on his spinner. It doesn't take rocket science. There was a wave of heat after I changed, my whole body shifted, and when we got home and I found food, I was ravenous. I suspected it was a massive calorie burn my body was trying to adjust to. I assumed if we changed again, the same thing would happen. If not, well, I didn't need to grocery shop for a while. That made things click for McKenna, and she poked at the crumbs on her table. You weren't kidding about food bills, were you? No. But then I guess if you don't shift, nothing will change. She wanted to say it wouldn't be an issue. But already, she wanted back in that other form, that other self, to see what else she could do. So why did you come over? McKenna asked Anne, not ready to dwell on the attraction the idea had for her. Yeah. Anne looked a bit embarrassed. The incident is still being reviewed, though, JD, you'll be clear by morning, but stay off if you want. No issues have come up, and no one is really saying anything. Granted, I suspect half the world is still reeling from what's being revealed. Which is? You two haven't seen the news? When? Either I was at the police station or driving, and we both had too much on our minds to listen to anyone else talk. Point, Anne agreed. This is worldwide. No top age limit, though no one has reported anyone younger than 6 turning into an animal. And you are still the #1 video. A few others have appeared, but there is something about the fact that yours wasn't staged that is pulling in people left and right. Well, that, and Pretty Woman stark naked is helping as well. But that's part of why I'm here. McKenna got a bad feeling in her stomach. No matter what, she suspected she would not like what was going to come out of Anne's mouth. Word got out about the dispatcher that sent you on the domestic, and how you dealt with the woman with no drama or anything. That gave Kirk an idea. Hollick heaved a sigh. And I'll deny this if you ever mention it. but it might have some good aspects to it.
And that idea is?
Right now, we've had 2 other officers either reported or have come forward admitting that they changed into an animal. We're assuming by Monday that number will be higher. We want to create a special patrol group within the standard 3 shifts. We're hoping for 4 officers, 2 cars of shifters each shift. We know this is global, and putting people on leave or acting like this is anything other than permanent is going to get us in trouble. If this works, we'll pull in 911 too, probably the woman who contacted you, and prioritize your cars to shifter-related calls. You at least have some concept of what might be going on. The rest of us don't.
Trust me, Anne, I don't have the damnedest idea of what is going on with all of this.
Anne's smile had a bitter tint. I believe you. But you know what it's like to shift, to be an animal. Most of us? She shrugged. I don't think collectively people have decided whether to be excited or freaked the hell out. And that's part of our concern. We don't want species riots. Not here.
Hey, I'm still human, McKenna protested. I think.
I hope so. Anne's voice had a flatness that matched her eyes. Right now, I don't care. You're a sworn officer, and I need you to do your job. And I really don't care if you're an alien or a cougar. As long as you can appear human, I expect you to uphold your oath. The words hit McKenna like a slap, and she stiffened. We want you to head it. You're the most recognizable right now. You've been shortlisted for promotion, and a test date has been arranged next week for you to take the sergeant's test. I would advise you don't fail. Even if you did, which I know damn well would be on purpose, you're still part of this group. You just wouldn't get the pay bump, and someone else will lead.
I should have called in sick today.
It was the only thought that could even form in her mind. Chapter 8. Q&A.
North Korea has made an official statement that their country is immune to this plague sweeping the world. No North Korean has turned into a beast. South Korea, however, has reported rumors of more people fleeing North Korea and of midnight sweeps capturing people who are never heard of again. China is still silent, but in an interesting turn of events, one of their politicians was seen weeping in front of a spectacled bear in a courtyard in his home. The U.S. is still silent, but rumors are flying as to how this will be dealt with. TNN News Report. J.D. and McKenna sat in the quiet room, the bombshell still ringing in their ears. McKenna had been slated as the leader of the team. Even though J.D. had more time in, they wanted to leverage her visibility. Other members were still being selected from people who had changed among first responders. Rumors were a firefighter and an EMT would be joining their small group. Anne Hollick didn't have any other news right then, and she left, giving them time to absorb the information.
You okay with not getting top position?
J.D. snorted. Yes. Never had any desire to lead, and my mug on every camera? He waved at his face. Thanks, but not a chance. I'll support you, but have no desire to be you.
McKenna waved a hand at him. You can shift naked in front of everyone, then no one will care about your face.
I did, and they still liked you more. If she had anything she could have thrown at him, she would have. I suppose not much we can do about it till Monday. Not that I'm looking forward to it. Heck, what will the dress of the day be? J.D. blinked. Never even thought about it. Fudge. Figure business casual? I've got one pair of dress slacks that fits. Hey, your first order of business can be kilts for everyone. Then you have less to take off if you shift. She really wanted to make a smart aleck remark, but getting out of a kilt would be a heck of a lot easier than slacks. I hate dresses, she whined, not even caring as she dropped her head back on the sofa, sprawling out across it. Kilts for the win, J.D. grinned. She had to snicker. If nothing else, that would give her something to drive Kirk crazy over. You think we still report to Kirk? J.D. paused and thought about it, then shrugged. He doesn't have anything to do with the state level, but I wouldn't be surprised if he used this to stay associated with us. Joy,
Not even any silver lining. McKenna heaved a sigh, only partially mocking. You don't have to do it, you know, JD said, his voice quiet. But she had no issue hearing it. McKenna glanced his way in surprise. What do you mean? You could refuse, quit, throw a fit. There's only so much they'll do to pressure you into this. His voice had no inflections in it at all, and McKenna sat there, frozen. It never occurred to me, actually. Think about it. McKenna settled back into the couch, and did. Her mind racing in circles. Then she started to speak, mostly thinking out loud. This isn't what I'd prefer at all. I just want to do my job, helping people, but... She paused, working through the thoughts and feelings. I think this might be important. People seem to be looking up to me and my job, where I swore an oath, is asking me to do something that involves them. Well, I'd rather get shot than do this. It's important and is part of my oath to everyone. My oath was to people, and now people that I have something in common with are looking at me, watching what I do. How can I walk away just because I hate the idea of the spotlight? That would be putting my wants and needs over the oath I swore. So no, I'll do it. Not going to swear I'll be good at it, but it's my job, and I'll be damned if I do anything less than my best at my job. She flashed a smile at him as the last words came out, solidifying her thoughts. That's what I thought. I knew you were the right person for this, JD said, an odd note in his voice. You don't feel the same. Social responsibility was destroyed for me as a kid. His voice held a note of bitterness, but McKenna had learned a long time ago to leave his childhood alone. So? You can quit if you want, or get another position, she offered, trying not to let her foreboding show. Doing this without JD would suck. But she'd never ask him to do something he didn't want to. Nah. Well, I wouldn't do it for society. I'd do it for you. Besides, think of the conniption fit some of my relatives will have when they see me. I'm sure I'll be receiving hate mail shortly from everyone I grew up with. McKenna snorted. Probably. She glanced at the darkness outside, then the clock. Can you run me home? It's after 10. Surely most of them have to be gone now. Maybe I can sneak in the back way? Sure, but I wouldn't hold my breath on them being gone. JD stood up from the chair, pulling on shoes. I can hope, but I want my whiskey. How you can only drink rum, I don't get. And my stuff, I'd like to curl up and zone out, though I suspect I'll spend the evening researching online. Yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I know I want to play with it some more. Want to get out of here Saturday, go out to the mountains and actually play? The urge to say yes was strong, but practicality interfered. What about getting shot because we freaked someone out? I've got a friend with a cabin up there, so no hunters and lots of empty land. If we stay near the cabin in our car, we should hear anyone else coming in. Sure, but let's get me home first. I need a drink. Fine. Next time I'm at the store, I'll buy whiskey, so you don't have to be tortured with my rum. See, I knew you were trainable. McKenna flashed a smile at him while JD just flicked his spinner faster and faster as they headed out the door. Anne must have run off the reporter that had been waiting outside, and by mutual unspoken consent, they didn't turn on the radio, instead watching the city around them as they drove over to McKenna's house. The city struck her as quiet, apprehensive, as if it was holding its breath to see what would happen next. I get the feeling even more has happened than what we've been told, McKenna said quietly, as the odd atmosphere touched everything. Me too. I guess I'm going to have to get online and find out what's happening. Really rather be an ostrich. JD didn't sound any more enthusiastic than she felt. I completely understand. But I don't think we, especially me, can afford to ignore what is going on, McKenna said, a note of wistfulness in her voice. Probably not. JD turned on her street and stopped in shock. Kenna? McKenna had zoned out, thinking about stuff, and his comment snapped her back to seeing what surrounded her, and she inhaled a sharp breath. Her street and lawn in front of her complex were packed with cars and people. Every light in her complex was on, and people were arguing on the lawn. "They didn't leave," she said numbly. Honestly, she had expected to see a few still there, but not like this. "I think you're going to have to give in." Give in? Give in to what? "Their demands. You're not going to get in without giving them an interview, so suck it up and give them what they want." If she hadn't been shocked by the people waiting for her, at least she assumed it was her, she probably would have flipped JD off. But right now, she was trying to steel herself for more of this. "I said I'd do my job, and this is probably going to be part of it, isn't it?" "Most likely." His voice did not reassure her at all. Onward, Jeeves. Might as well face the ravening hordes now as opposed to later. "Of course, m'lady," he responded in a bad British accent as he stepped on the gas and slowly moved towards her place. There were 2 cop cars there, and they had kept the road clear, and an officer flagged them down as they pulled in. Whatever he had started to say was derailed when he saw McKenna. "Thank God you're here. Can you please talk to them and then get them to leave? We've got half the city blowing up, and we're having to dedicate 2 cars here to deal with all these guys, not to mention your outraged neighbors." McKenna blinked, taken off balance. "Do I know you?" The young man snorted. "No. Officer Bobby Allspecht. I just started last year, and our paths haven't crossed, but trust me, at this point, every officer on the force knows you by sight. You're the one they're waiting for, so please, I'm begging you." "See, Kenna, already you got cute young things begging you," JD teased, and the young man flushed red, even as McKenna groaned. "Sorry, ignore him. He has no manners whatsoever." "No worries. I've got a brother. I know what jerks they can be." The man flashed a smile and waved them in. Even as they drove in, people started to swell up from their cars and seats on the ground. "This isn't going to work." McKenna fought the squeak of panic in her voice. "Yeah, I'll lift you up to the roof. You can stand up there and answer questions." "You're going to let me stand on your precious vehicle?" "Better than them tipping it to get to you. You aren't going to dent it." "Gee, thanks." She rolled her eyes but let him get out first and open her door. The instant swell of voices and people calling her name crashed into her like a physical force, and she was almost relieved when JD's hands wrapped around her waist and without any effort set her butt down on his roof. She scrambled to her feet, looking at the mass of people and lights that instantly fixated on her, all but blinding her. "At least this way I don't have to see any faces, I guess." Her name, being shouted in many variations, created an intimidation effect, but she forced a smile and surveyed the sea of lights, cameras, and phones. "Everyone, as I'm sure you know, I am Officer McKenna Largo. As you can guess, it's been a long day for everyone, and I'm sure all my neighbors would like to go to bed and forget all this. I'll give you 30 minutes to ask your questions, and then I'll ask you to leave and direct all further questions to the Rossville Police Department. This will be the only unsanctioned interview I will do. Use your questions wisely and enjoy the scoop." That had been the only thing she could think of to prevent this from becoming a regular occurrence. And if she had to, she'd rent a hotel room for a few days. People shouted at her, the words merging into a cacophony of sound that she couldn't interpret anything from. She lifted her hands with a sharp gesture, holding them out over the crowd, which simmered down to a murmur. "I can't hear you when you're all shouting, so if you want me to answer a question, raise your hand and I'll just point at you." This is so ridiculous. Next time I'll hand out numbers and just pull them out of a bag, lottery style. Really? People. "You." She pointed at a guy with a cameraman close behind him. Do you plan on keeping being a police officer now that you can shift?" McKenna looked at him and blinked. "Yeah. I still have rent and food I need to buy, and I don't think anyone is going to pay me just to exist. What else would I do? It's my job." The reporter didn't look happy at that answer. But before he could say anything, she'd learned from the last time, she picked someone else.
Why did you change into an animal, specifically a cat?
A, I turned into a cougar, not just a cat. B, I don't have a clue. Last I heard, the rumors were flying like crazy, and I don't know a single fact other than the fact I did shift. Next, she said, moving fast, trying to get through this.
What is having sex as a cat like?
She heard JD choking where he stood at the door of his vehicle, and she just looked at the man, her face blank. Seriously? That's your question? Are you stupid? People already asked that, and I refused to answer it then. I don't know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know if someone has an answer to that. Just grow up. Ew. She knew that response was not really professional, but neither was the question. She jabbed her hand at one woman, who oddly didn't look like a reporter. Can I come and learn at your feet so I can also be blessed with the gift of shifting? McKenna just looked at her for a long moment and ignored JD all but rolling on the ground. She finally looked at the woman and gave her the only answer she could. No. Next. 15 minutes later, with questions like, are you happy about this? Why did this happen? Do you have a mate? Do you have a pack? And JD's favorite, will you marry me? I know I can satisfy you. They finally finished up. The beat cops chased everyone away, and she hopped down from the roof and looked around at all her neighbors staring out at her. A hotel is sounding better and better, she muttered. I'll take you if you want, JD said, still fighting a smile from some of the crazy questions. Nah, I just might sleep with my gun today, though after seeing the claws I have, those might be scarier. Point. JD followed her up to her second-floor apartment, and she suspected his presence prevented some of her neighbors making comments, which did not hurt her feelings at all. They stopped at her door, and he glanced at it, then her. You want me to stay? No. I want to walk around mostly naked with my whiskey and then cruise websites. You would totally ruin my ability to do that. Another low chuckle emerged from JD. Fine. I'll hit you up tomorrow and see if anything has changed. Yeah, I know. I know I'll need to get some more food if I decide to change, and then if we make it up to the mountain on Sunday, we'll need to get stuff. Yep. Okay, get inside and I'll see you later. Yes, Mom. McKenna rolled her eyes as she went into her apartment, almost automatically checking for new scents. She choked as her nose and mind were swamped with information, stumbling a bit. Everything okay? Oh, yeah. Fine. I'll see you later. She forced the smile and then shut the door as JD turned away. She leaned back against the door and inhaled deeply through her nose. The scent she had not noticed earlier, her mind too overloaded with worries earlier, assailed her now. A vanilla scent. Something rotting in her kitchen. Detergent. Perfumes from her bathroom, gas fumes from passing cars via the open window, stubbornness, worry, all of them wrapped around her, dropping bits of information and implications as her brain cataloged everything as fast as the scent hit. This is both cool as hell and freaking me out. Swallowing, she walked in and headed to her bedroom, stripping into something comfortable, then went to the kitchen. The rotting smell seemed stronger as she walked in, and in a second she had identified the garbage disposal as the culprit. It took a minute to run it, the noise so loud she frowned, making a mental note to have it looked at. That helped, and she poured her whiskey and grabbed her laptop. Normally, she might have headed to her little balcony to sit and stare out at the night to think. But after the question she had been asked, the idea that someone might be watching her didn't sound as far-fetched as it might have. With that, she sat down and powered up her laptop. She didn't get on it much, really, only for email or if she needed to log into work remotely. McKenna pulled up a browser, entering her email on one tab, then another, and pulled up the local news site, then added on another for worldwide news. People changing was the only story, and she instantly had a map shoved into her face with the changed shown by dots. That fascinated her. And the U.S. still seemed to be the most densely affected, but any metro area had more clusters. However, the numbers seemed low. The current report seemed to indicate that about 2%, maybe a bit more, of people changed, the variety of animals coming in seeming wide. The question was, how many people reported it? She wouldn't have if it hadn't been captured in such embarrassing detail. Thoughts and ideas flipped through her head. She clicked on a link about the theory behind this occurrence, and then clicked on her email tab while she waited for it to load. Taking a sip of whiskey, she focused on her email and choked on said whiskey as the information registered. Normally, she had 15 to 20 emails, half spam, the rest the occasional friend or newsletter. The number on her email flashed at her. She set down the whiskey and rubbed her eyes and checked again. The number didn't change. I have 2,345 emails? Her voice squeaked as the words burst out of her mouth. McKenna looked at the subject lines, bolded so it was easy to scan through them. Way too many had a subject of Shifter Queen. And then it got more diverse. Taking a fortifying swallow of whiskey, she clicked on one. The message made her, a cop who had seen just about everything, shudder and hit delete. Oh, this is not good. She started randomly clicking through her email, deleting them. Then she stopped. With a sense of sick dread, she went and found what she had deleted and moved them back to her inbox, then created folders. Sick. Marriage proposals. Threats. Shifter scams. With grim determination, she started filing the emails, reading only enough to identify what folder to put it in. The overall feel basically drove home how public she had become and how much visibility was focused on her. The point had been driven home, and she sighed. So much for being just a person anymore, I guess. In between filing, she read the news, and the information began to coalesce in her mind. This was worldwide, and millions of people had shifted. But millions more hadn't. Social studies was a lifetime away, but she still remembered reading about segregation issues. If that started now, the people you were trying to segregate were living weapons, and when you corner people, they fight. Dread pooled in her stomach as more information was pieced together in her head. And while she didn't like it at all, the group of shifters suddenly seemed much more important than she originally thought. I've always tried to do my job to the best of my abilities. I guess now it's even more important. Chapter 9. Dilemmas.
No one knows what problems or opportunities are going to arise from this change. Is it permanent? Are people always going to be animals from now on? Will it change them? We haven't seen any short-term changes, but long-term, what is going to happen to people, to families, to society? This will change the way we think, feel, and interact with others. Have you seen that video? Claws are weapons that can't be removed, and so far there isn't any indication that you can tell who is or isn't this new type of creature. Can you imagine someone turning into a cat or a wolf on a plane? There are real concerns here. Zero-weapon policy doesn't matter anymore. They will always be armed. We need to think about these things now, before we pay the price. Opinion piece in New York Times. SeaTac Jones, Alfonso to his mother, flinched as Paco sat down on the same bench he waited on. Paco didn't look at him, instead scanning the park with predator eyes. The late summer afternoon cast brilliant light everywhere, creating a pleasant afternoon for the people enjoying the park. The drama earlier in the day with the bank had been on all the stations, but as of yet he passed it off as a publicity stunt. Cops were always trying to distract from how crooked they were. Though the rumors were, the vid had a nice-looking cop chick full naked. Might be worth looking at. He shifted his attention to Paco, who'd been silent, waiting for SeaTac. He wants to talk to you, Paco said, sliding a small phone across the bench to SeaTac. Paco didn't fit the image of a high-level gangster. If anything, he looked like a college prep boy in his designer jeans that fit well, polo shirt, and nice haircut. The boss preferred people that the cops never looked at twice. Unfortunately, SeaTac couldn't pull that off as easily. At 6'3" and black as jet, with a shaved head, cops always gave him a second glance. It didn't matter how nicely he dressed, and even if he made sure his tats were covered, people were wary around him. Paco, with his preppy Hispanic look, had it made, and his role in the organization showed it. SeaTac picked up the phone and lifted it. "Yes, sir." "Mr. Jones." The voice on the other end was flat, polite, and educated. SeaTac had never heard of the boss raising his voice or losing his temper. Rumor was even when he ordered people disposed of, it was as uninterested as if he was ordering dinner. "You have not been meeting your quotas of late. I do believe I told you that your baseline was $5,000 a week. You only made $2,000 this week. If you cannot move the product, then I am sure I can find someone else who will." "No, sir, I'll get my numbers up." He flinched both at the stuttering and trying to figure out how in the world he'd get his numbers up. The only market share he could think of he hadn't leveraged was children. And yes, he read marketing books. The boss rewarded those who got degrees, but he'd never be able to afford school. The problem was, his mama would never forgive him if he started marketing to school kids. He found himself caught between his mama and a killer. "Good. Remember, I am always open to new ideas or marketing plans. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to remove obstacles in your path." With that, the boss hung up. SeaTac slid the phone back to Paco. The weird thing was, the boss was serious. If he came up with an idea or something that would make money, the boss would seriously consider it. The guy didn't give a damn about anything except profit. He had no ego, only facts. And he scared SeaTac half to death. "Any questions?" Paco asked, still paying more attention to the surrounding people than SeaTac. "No, I'm good." Paco nodded once, got up, and strode away. A relaxed, easy stride that made SeaTac grind his teeth. With a sigh, he let the irritation at the younger man being over him go and focused on his issue. How the hell was he going to get revenue up? Oh, sure. If you were higher up, you got benefits and bonuses. He was a low-level guy, with only 6 people under him, mostly teenagers who'd done so much meth their brains were as rotted as their teeth, which meant they screwed up regularly, and he had to deal with it. He needed better territory and better people, but he couldn't do that unless he proved he could push the product. A vague memory of a phrase that described his situation floated through his brain, but he couldn't pull it up. After a minute, he shrugged and let it go. School had bored him, and dropping out at 17 seemed like the smart thing to do. Now, he wasn't so sure. He had money, but he could feel himself slipping down further every day. Something had to change. What? He sat on the bench in the park, staring out at the grassy area on the playground. While he got a few looks, no one approached him. He smirked as a woman made a wide berth around him. Scaring the normals was always amusing, especially when the cops couldn't roust him out of here. It was a public park, and he didn't have a single thing on him that was restricted. So they could come and leer all they wanted. He didn't have to move even 1 foot. It provided a constant source of entertainment. With a sigh, he shook his head and ran his hands over his bald pate. He had decided, after seeing the mistakes his brother made, to never get anything done that couldn't be covered up with a shirt if he needed to appear professional. When he started working for the boss, that decision had been a lifesaver. Literally. He needed to figure out a new market for product, and most of the local areas were already claimed by someone. Or he had to come up with something completely new. Various ideas popped into his head, but they all seemed stupid or required too much capital. Nothing seemed to click. At this rate, he'd either get fired or killed or have to get a real job. The last option almost sounded worse than the first. A woman caught his attention. She was pretty, with that American Indian sort of coloring. He'd always thought that was sexy. A documentary he had watched last night about some group of people and their slaves, bodyguards raised to be there for their lifetime, flashed through his mind. He leaned back. Far enough away he could watch her without it being obvious, and enjoyed the movement of her body. He liked his women strong and slim, and she fit. 2 kids came running up to her, dropping down like boneless jellyfish on the blanket she had spread. SeaTac rolled his eyes. Kids were not anything he wanted to deal with. Distracted, he
He watched, but no longer saw as he went back to dealing with his problem. He needed to get some better dealers to move his product. Elementary schools were out of the question, but the local college presented possibilities. Thinking, he pulled up who ran that area. A jerk, if he remembered correctly. Always kept the same routine, never pushing the boundaries because he made enough with the constant flux of students into the school. A slow smile spread across his face, and he picked up his phone, clicking a contact that just said, Bacon. "What?" a voice answered, brisk and annoyed, and an odd level of stress he'd never heard before. "Got a tip for you about a dealer at the college." "What's he selling?" There was a half note of interest, and SeaTac grinned. "Pot isn't the issue, but he's got some stuff that's been laced with LSD, his special stuff. He'll be at the college coffee shop tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. for people to pick up their orders. Young guy, hippie sort. You can't miss him." "If you're sending me on a goose chase, I don't have time for this." "Swear, he's selling bad drugs. You know I don't give you bad info. And he might have some coke stashed in his car. Kilo or two?" "You also don't do anything for free. What's in it for you?" "Just a future consideration. You know how I like to help the authorities." SeaTac drawled out the last word, and the man on the other end snorted. "Sure, whatever. I've got to go. Don't call unless you've got something good, something worth my time to bust." The line dropped, and SeaTac grinned. Now to make plans to step into the space and take over that territory. Then he'd start making some real money. College kids never seemed all that smart to him, for all the classroom learning they paid for. A shriek of surprise and stress yanked his eyes back to the woman and the two kids, and his attention sharpened. Something was wrong. The kids were on the ground, writhing, and the mom wasn't yelling anymore, just standing there, her hands covering her mouth as she watched. "What the hell?" he muttered and stood, curious now as to what was going on. The shifting that he saw didn't make sense until it completed, and two black cats were laying on the ground, struggling with the clothes that now bound them. The mom dropped to her knees and helped them out of their clothes. In a minute, two large cats, well, large compared to house cats, SeaTac supposed, wobbled in front of her. The news that had been blaring everywhere clicked back into his mind, and he leaned forward. If he had to guess from her body language, he would have said the woman was resigned, not upset or scared. If he had thought he could get closer, he might have, but instead he pulled out his phone, lifted up the camera, and made use of the zoom feature. He watched the two cats cavort around, fully in control of their bodies, and then saw them shred the blanket with their claws. Claws that even from where he sat looked sharp as knives. For some weird reason, he could never figure out how his brain worked, the two cats made him think how cool it would be to have full-grown jaguars guarding him. Completely loyal, dangerous cats with the intelligence of humans. Now, how cool would that be? Wait. Could he do it? Raise children to be loyal guards? Protect those they were put with? Kids were animals for the most part, and you'd want to treat any bodyguard well. They'd never be abused or hungry. Hell, some third world countries might even sell them to you, knowing that child would have a better life. Ideas started to spark in his mind, and SeaTac leaned back, watching and thinking. At this rate, he might have a viable business venture to offer, if all the pieces would come together. If nothing else, the pelts would sell a pretty price. After all, if you killed them while they were an animal, you weren't really hurting a child, right? Chapter 10. Grocery Shopping. It has been 3 days since the video and the event that changed the world. We still have no idea what caused this or how it affected multiple continents, but none of that matters in the long run. Change has happened to our society, and we have to deal with it. While no one knows the numbers yet, rough estimates are that about 2% of people might have changed. The Pope has promised to speak tomorrow to the people gathering for Mass in St. Peter's Square. Fires are raging in Jerusalem right now.
There are reports of an imam changing during prayer, and the backlash has been extreme, with sects splintering even more as the question of becoming an animal fractures belief. Report from NPR. McKenna probably drank a bit too much the night before, staring at the screen and all the stories coming in from across the globe, sipping on the whiskey as she tried to get a handle on the information. But not enough to create a headache. Her eyes flicked open at 5 on the dot, and she sighed. Day off, and I still can't sleep in. Figures, she muttered and pulled herself out of bed. A shower and coffee later, she stood looking at a distressingly empty fridge. Crap. I guess I'm getting out, and she looked around thinking. Normally, she didn't eat that much, but if this kept up, JD's comment about her food bill skyrocketing would prove too accurate, which meant cheaper to buy in bulk. But that also meant a freezer. With a sigh, she gave into something she had been resisting for years. Buying a Sam's Club membership. Standing there the minute they opened, McKenna bought the Plus membership and found herself walking around Sam's with a new card. She'd paid for a chest freezer that would be delivered shortly. The delivery had cost her extra, but it was worth it. She was standing and looking at the array of meat as she calculated her budget and the capacity of the freezer when a voice spoke behind her. "Officer Largo?" Cringing just the tiniest bit, McKenna steeled herself and turned around. She almost instantly relaxed when she saw Tonin Diaz. At least that was how the official reports listed her, standing there with her 2 kids. "Hello, Miss Diaz." She looked her over. Tonin looked a bit tired, but overall, well. Her eyes turned to the kids and frowned a bit when she would swear they were a bit taller than last time, but she dismissed that. There had been a lot going on, and perspective from a cat wasn't the best basis for memories. At least, not yet. It was on the list of things to work on. "You and the kids seem to be fine." A half smile creased the woman's mouth. "Please, call me Tony. I keep looking for my mother-in-law when you say that. As for the rest, I guess. Turns out I wasn't the only one in my family to shift." She cast a glance at the 2 kids. They both turned into Jaguar Cubs, at the park, of all places. We went there after the bank. They needed to run off energy. More ways than one, I guess. She shook herself. "I wanted to introduce my children and say hi, and thank you again." McKenna shrugged. The last thing she needed was more thanks, which meant paying attention to children was preferable, which had to be a first. Sure. She focused her attention to the 2 kids who were watching her with odd expressions on their faces, ones she couldn't interpret. "Jamie, Jesse, say hello to Officer Largo," Tony said, nudging the 2 kids. Sharp green eyes looked out from identical faces, though their hair was worn differently. One of them had their hair back in a ponytail. The other, not quite as long, was worn loose and messy. The ponytail child flashed a sudden grin up at McKenna.
"You turned into that cougar and protected Jamie. That was awesome. Mom turned into a jaguar, and that was cool too. But what you did, wow. I want to grow up to be a police officer like you."
"You must be Jessie, then?" McKenna asked, amused by the child staring up at her.
"Yes, I'm 7.5. Jamie's my brother,"
Jessie asserted, still looking at her. "Being a cop is hard. You have to work at it," McKenna warned. Not sure she was the right person to be giving career advice. Tony smirked and mouthed thank you to Kenna, who fought to keep a straight face. "What about you, Jamie? What do you want to be?" McKenna asked. Not sure what else she was supposed to say. Jamie shrugged. "Dunno. The cat thing is cool."
"Can anyone be a cat?"
McKenna blinked. The kid was right. Who knew how this change thing worked? "I don't know." Tony laughed. "Jamie, this is a brand new world. I don't think any of us know. So for now, yes, I guess?" Tony just shrugged. Jamie glanced at her, then away, and grabbed Jessie's hand and dragged her towards the cage of balls. They instantly started arguing about which color was the best. Jamie leaned towards purple, while Jessie wanted green.
They seem like a handful.
I have no idea what to say. I don't do kids. Kids are complicated and messy. I hated being a kid. You have no idea. Tony glanced at the two, quietly arguing. Though I have no idea what I'd do without them. They're impossible, but they're also mine. McKenna frowned. No father in the picture? Old pain flashed across Tony's face. My husband was Officer Jeffrey Diaz. He was killed in the line of duty 3 years ago. McKenna closed her eyes. Way to go. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I didn't start until 2 years ago. Tony shrugged. Trust me, that's an old wound, and nothing you did or didn't do would affect it. So, yes, my kids tend to get the brunt of my attention. I assume they'll hate me for it between 13 and 18, but I can live with that. Heck, the cat thing almost doesn't bug me. Gives me another layer of safety. A cat can be nasty when cornered. She cast an amused glance at McKenna. As most of the world has seen. Ugh. The groan slipped out before she could stop it. Tony chuckled a bit. I get it. But I can't help but be grateful. If this sticks around, they'll have one more weapon, and one no one can take from them. You're a lot more bloodthirsty and realistic than most civilians I deal with, McKenna noted, watching the woman carefully. Tony shrugged. I've never been a pacifist. Technically, I'm a Marine, did 4 years, including 2 tours, and right now I'm a 911 operator, so my view of the world might be a bit skewed. But all in all, I'd rather have my children on trial for murder than dead as a victim. McKenna blinked. She'd never heard anyone state that so bluntly, but she couldn't really argue. Finding victims, especially children, had to be the hardest part of the job. Just makes me glad I'm not a mom. Surprised a bit at herself for the comment, but she didn't take it back. So, have you played with this? She waved her hands a bit to encompass everything. At all yet? She hadn't talked to anyone beside JD, and she definitely wasn't going to ask any of the crazies that had sent her emails. So in a way, that made Tony the safest person to ask. Tony glanced around, and McKenna had to fight not to be embarrassed. Talking publicly about something that was still a hotbed of craziness might not be the safest thing. A bit? I got the kids home pretty quick and let them run around the apartment. She looked a bit embarrassed. We were saving up for a house, but never got one, and the money, well, she shrugged. Let's just say life doesn't always work the way you think it will. But after they changed back, I swear they about ate me out of every bit of food I had. Hence being here. She waved at her overflowing cart that finally dawned on McKenna, looked a lot like hers with a bit more sugar. I'm not willing to let them run around outside yet. Not with the news right now, so I don't know. I want to play, but I'm not willing to go out right now. So, catch-22, I guess. McKenna nodded and bit her tongue. The idea JD floated sounded better and better. And she rather liked this woman, but offering up an outing was going a bit far. Maybe later. Would you be willing to exchange numbers and maybe talk occasionally? Tony asked, her eyes on her kids who had navigated over to the books, still staying quiet but definitely having an intense discussion. Yes. The answer leapt off her tongue, and she was glad the woman had asked because she hadn't known how to. Thanks. Just, I don't know anyone else who has shifted, and they promised to keep my name out of the report. From what I could see, unless you paused and zoomed, I wasn't that visible in the video, but Tony's voice caught, for all that her face remained calm and composed. I just don't know who else to talk to. I totally get that. Here, give me your phone. Tony did, without even blinking, though McKenna had to admit it wasn't like Tony didn't know exactly who she was and how to find her if she needed. With a few quick taps of her phone, She had sent herself a text message. She handed back the phone, then sent one to Tony, identifying herself only as Kenna. Why, she didn't want to think about, but this had nothing to do with her job, which was a rarity. Thanks. I'd better get going before they come to the conclusion that changing in the middle of the story is completely valid. McKenna fought a smile and nodded. Yeah, me too. I've got stuff to do today, and I'd better get on it. They exchanged half-tentative, half-hopeful nods, and then headed back on their own paths. When she had picked up her phone, McKenna realized how behind she was and quickened her pace to try to finish shopping. She needed to get home before they delivered the freezer. Heading to the car, she focused on her car, her mind running through a million things she needed to do when she got home. High on that list was eating. Her stomach and head were telling her she needed food. She'd taken a few of the samples in Sam's, but in many ways, she thought it might have made it worse. Her body clamored for food, and she really couldn't figure out why. But at this point, she just wanted to get home and scarf down the chimichangas she had purchased, and she was rapidly approaching the point where she didn't care if they were cooked or not. Hey, bitch, or is it pussy? An insulting voice cut across her thoughts, and she stiffened as she realized she'd completely zoned out, focusing only on her list of things to do, instead of watching her surroundings. Her training snapped in, and she started thinking about the danger she was in. About time, moron. What, you thought your notoriety was just going to disappear? Her own mental voice castigated her as she turned to face two big, beefy rednecks who had to outweigh her by at least 100 pounds each. And from the way they carried themselves, they knew how to use their bodies to intimidate others. A third guy hung back a bit, an unsure expression on his face. May I help you, gentlemen? The leader, a big boy with red blonde hair, shrugged, pushing back his baseball cap a bit as he strutted closer. Maybe. I've always liked girls with a wild side. I figure a pussy that can really become a pussy would be as wild as I can get. McKenna sighed internally. Really? I get redneck morons on top of this? Gentlemen, as you know who I am, I assume you also know I'm a police officer. So why don't you just go away now, and we'll forget this happened. The leader shrugged. So? My brother's a cop, and he says he knows you, that you're a frigid bitch who just needs a hard cock to be personable. That comment stung. Having random idiots call her names didn't faze her, but the idea that another cop would think that way about her cut deep. Deeper than she expected. The sigh was a bit more forced than she expected it to be, but she exaggerated it, even as she took a better stance to be able to move, nudging the cart so it bumped against her car, resting there gently. Really? Just go home. I don't have time for this, or the desire. She tried one more time, hoping maybe they'd go away. Guess he was right. Even becoming a cat hasn't heated this pussy up. McKenna blinked. How long did you have to work to come up with that? The leader paused for a minute, off balance. Huh? I mean, really? Pussy for cat? In heat? I mean, did you sit at home and work on your bad double meanings? He just looked at her, his face blank. And you didn't even realize you did it. Go home, she ordered, now just completely exasperated with this whole situation. I don't think so. I want to see what a cat looks like naked. He moved forward, his two friends flanking him, and McKenna groaned. God, the paperwork on this is going to suck. Well, this should be good. I wonder if I'll get over 1 million views in the first 10 or first 15 minutes. Tony's voice came out as the men were approaching McKenna. Everyone turned to look where the voice had come from. Tony stood there, her phone in front of her, holding it steady as she continued to talk. Oh, I already called the police, and I'm live streaming this on social media, mentioning the local police station. Oh, look, I'm already getting responses that units are on their way, so please continue. I'm sure Officer Largo won't mind the extra publicity. After all, she's already one of the most recognizable women in the world. Tony's voice never changed from calm and disinterested as she filmed. Smile, guys. I'm sure people are going to want to talk to you afterwards, and you're about to become famous. Or is it notorious? McKenna didn't know if she wanted to fall down in laughter or start beating her head against the pavement. The men all started looking at each other with uncertain looks.
Oh, Stephen, apparently your wife is watching and wants to let you know she'll be talking to you when you get home.
But if she has to bail you out of jail, you can wait for the divorce attorney. One of the men with short dark hair paled and took 2 steps back. Sorry, dude, I'm out of here. He ducked his head down between his shoulders and quickly weaved his way between cars and disappeared. Fuck this shit, I'll catch you later. The blonde leader snarled, and he and his friend both took off running, the sound of police sirens chasing their departure. The stress drained out of McKenna, and her head spun to the point she had to reach out to her car and let it steady her. Tony put her phone away and glanced behind her. McKenna followed her gaze to see 2 faces peering over the back seat of a small Honda sedan. Tony walked over to her, a wry smile on her face. I guess it's reassuring to know that assholes never change. McKenna choked on laughter, then tried hard to not pass out as the world spun. Frack. Here, eat. There was a soft tearing sound, and Tony shoved a protein bar into her hands. Your sugar has bottomed out. Eat. McKenna did, the first bit of it on her tongue helping as the cop cars pulled into the lot and headed their way. The sirens and lights actively hurt, and she wished she had earplugs. The sound clicking off as the cars stopped in front of them was a relief. An officer McKenna recognized but didn't know stepped out, a sardonic look on his face. You just can't stay out of trouble, can you, Largo? She snorted. Yeah, like that was how I wanted to end the day. She cast a nod at Tony. You can thank Miss Diaz here, though, for both of us avoiding a ton of paperwork. They weren't going to leave me alone. Yeah, we were listening. She got it up about the time you were pointing out the heat and cat pun. Good thinking, Miss Diaz. That probably saved everyone. Tony shrugged. Seemed appropriate given that social media got her into this mess. McKenna snorted, and she noticed at least one of the officers fighting a smile. Well, then if you don't need us, we're going to head out. Keep an eye out, Largo. These probably aren't the only idiots around. I wouldn't be that lucky. Will do. The officers waved and then pulled out. McKenna shot a look at Tony, who was fighting a smirk. I guess I owe you. Not even. You saved my child's life. I'm never not going to be in your debt. Besides, that was amusing. Tony grinned. We both have groceries thawing, so I'm going to get going. Call me, seriously? Tony smiled at her, then turned away to finish loading her purchases into the car and left. By the time McKenna got home, the delivery guys were waiting for her with a freezer. She ran up the stairs to let them in, then headed back down to get the metric ton of groceries out of her car and into her apartment. She waved at the men leaving. They had plugged in the freezer, and it was already cooling as she trotted back down for yet another trip. She'd have to super stuff her fridge and freezer before she could start putting stuff in it. The delay in cooling she hadn't counted on. Maybe I'm overreacting, but as it is, it's all I can do to not start eating now. My body can wait another 15 minutes. She kept repeating that mantra as she returned with the second-to-last load of bags. As she moved back to the stairs, Mrs. Kellerman came out of her ground-floor apartment. Warren Kane held tight in hands, knobby and worn by her decades of life. Hey, Mrs. Kellerman, how's your day gone? In the 2 years McKenna had lived there, she had gotten to like the old woman, her dark hair now all but white, and her cookies that reminded McKenna of a life lost. While not a friend, she had been friendly and a good neighbor over the years. Mrs. Kellerman turned and kept walking, not paying attention to McKenna's hello. Well, that was odd. She ran up the groceries and returned as Mrs. Kellerman hobbled back from the mailbox, her worn yellow house dress hanging on her frame. Hey, you doing okay? Sorry about the crowds last night. Hope they didn't disturb you too much, McKenna said, reaching out to help her up the curb. Mrs. Kellerman shrank back from her outstretched arm, her thin lips drawn back in a sneer.
Don't touch me, you animal. I saw what you are. Get away from me before you infect me with your disease.
The words were hissed out, Spittle flew from her mouth. McKenna flinched back, her heart stuttering to a stop. Mrs. Kellerman? What are you talking about?
You're an animal. You hid it, but it figures you'd be a nasty beast. Stay away from me. I'll be contacting the property manager to try and get you out of here. Us decent humans shouldn't have to deal with animals like you in the very place they live.
She all but spit the last words at McKenna as she disappeared into her apartment. McKenna stood there, throat tight, and fought to breathe normally. Mind locked down, refusing to explore what just happened. She grabbed the last of her stuff, locked the car, and headed back to her apartment. Once in, she shut and locked the door, and for a first time in over a year, clicked the security bar into place. She zapped 3 chimichangas and inhaled them, but they only blunted the hunger. With a sigh, she threw a pan of frozen enchiladas into the oven and worked on organizing and dealing with all the food she had purchased. 30 minutes later, food had been put away and the enchiladas were done cooking. Sitting down with the whole pan, at least 4 times what she would have normally eaten, McKenna pulled up the web and started reading the news, even as she put the too hot food into her mouth. The interaction with Mrs. Kellerman unfortunately didn't turn out to be a fluke or something specific to her. Reports were filtering up on hate crimes against those who had come out, or shifted, as it was being called. Already, sides were being drawn, and her email was flooded with requests and offers and other things. Her folders were overflowing, and she didn't know what to do. Overloaded with info, she shut off the computer, and taking the half-eaten pan, she grabbed her whiskey, not giving a damn it was only 2 p.m. She went out to her small balcony and took a large mouthful, eating mechanically. It wasn't all that good. She made much better, but time and convenience had won this battle. What do I want to do? The idea rattled around in her head, but she kept hitting a wall. She didn't know anything, not about the shifting or the abilities once shifted. There really wasn't any other option. If she didn't get control of this, she was going to be buffeted around by everyone and everything with no control. McKenna didn't do not in control. She'd been at others' mercy too much as a kid. She had decided a long time ago to make sure she was in control of her own life, which partially explained her career choice. That being decided, she got up and started dinner. The enchiladas had just been lunch. A roast with veggies, which might allow her to have leftovers, was thrown in the oven. It would take about 3 hours to cook. She pulled her curtains over the sliding glass doors and set her phone to Do Not Disturb. With a mental sigh, she stood, still dressed in jeans, tee, and tennis shoes. I guess I'd better learn what shifting in clothes means and see how much damage I do. Taking a deep breath, she closed her eyes and focused on being a cat. Again. Chapter 11. Research.
2 students at UCLA were found dead today. The police still aren't sure of the cause of death. Drugs were found on site with evidence of use. Both students were known to have changed and were seen around the campus yesterday appearing healthy and in good condition, but their bodies were found withered, thin, and dehydrated. All evidence points to starvation over years. Police are still investigating to see what caused the deaths.
KWAC News Radio. The change this time was smooth and easy. Her bones and muscles shifting and realigning, and it almost felt normal this time. Almost. McKenna managed not to fall over, but the clothes bound her weirdly. Her shoes just slipped off, so that was good to know. But the socks felt wrong in a way she'd never experienced. Her jeans caught on the bend of her knees, and she had to struggle for a minute to slide out of them. Good to know. Basically stretch and they fall off, but what the hell am I going to do about the underwear, bra, and shirt? Her boy shorts were hung up, with her tail going down the hole with her left leg, and her haunches caught them oddly. She squirmed for a minute, trying to get out of them. Damn it. I really don't want to shred my clothes every time I need or want to change. After another minute of squirming and stretching, she managed to get them off in one piece and was very glad there was no one around to watch that performance. But the t-shirt and bra weren't giving. Before, she had just snapped it, not caring in the need to get to the kid. But bras were expensive. Finally, by catching the shirt with her teeth, she managed to pull it over her head by holding it down with one paw and backing out of it. The bra she just decided to ignore. Shifting back right now would just be a pain. And she didn't have anyone she needed to fight with at this moment. The bra hung oddly on her body, but didn't prevent movement as her cat chest seemed narrower than her human. Dang it. JD's idea of kilts is sounding better and better. Will never let me live this down. That, or a stripper's wardrobe, where I can just rip everything off. The idea that she was thinking of this as a long-term option struck her, and she chased it down. It had started to feel normal, a part of her, and something that would be around for a long time. Why in the world would that idea have sunk in so quickly? Pushing that away as something to discuss with JD, and maybe Tony later, she closed her eyes and just listened and felt them twitch as she focused on different sounds. She could hear so much. People upstairs talking, the TV playing, the cars driving by. Her apartment had decent soundproofing. She could occasionally hear yelling, usually during football games, or the random slammed door, but that was about it. Now, she knew her neighbors were talking about what they wanted to do tomorrow, and if they could skip church. McKenna opened her eyes and looked around her house, tilting her head as she thought about what she saw. Her walls were a normal beige, and that color seemed about the same, but her green and blue couch and the bright curtains seemed dull and washed out. Her vision got blurred more as she looked down the hall. What she could normally see clearly from where she lay seemed blurry and out of focus. A curtain twitched from the draft of the air conditioning, and her head snapped to it the second it moved. Well, I know I react to movement. I think I read cats have good night vision, but definitely not for distance work. I can't see much more than 50 feet clearly. Things start to get fuzzy around the edges. All the information got filed, and she went back to her nose, having saved that one for last, as she already knew it was hypersensitive. McKenna took a deep breath in through her nose and was flooded with smells and information. It was the information that confused her. She had no idea what worry smelled like. The sharp spice of the cumin and tomatoes made sense, as did the urine smell from down the hall. I swear, if JD doesn't stop splattering outside my bowl, I'm going to make him go outside. She put a mental note to clean the bathroom when she shifted back. More than ever, she wanted to be outside, to take in the smells. Even an open window right now would have been nice, but she'd closed everything up in preparation for this. Sense check. Not going to worry about taste or touch, but I need to look at these new weapons. What I can do will have to wait until I'm outside. With another internal sigh, remembering the pictures of the man she had eviscerated, she flopped on her side and pulled her paw towards her. Somehow, she knew how to extend her claws. It was a natural action to have them extend from her paws. They were almost an inch long, a dull yellowish color to her cat eyes. Without conscious thought, her tongue darted out and licked along the length of her thumb claw. And instantly, she tasted blood. Ow! How the hell do cats do that? Why in the hell did I do that? She swallowed down the blood. The gash hadn't been deep, and the blood had stopped welling almost instantly, but it proved how sharp her claws were. But what else can they do? That went down as another thing to check on in the mountains. Just how much damage could she do with these claws? Turning in a way that her mind screamed should hurt her back, she arched to look at her hind paws, the claws extended. She realized she could wiggle them, but they didn't retract completely, and long ago biology information snapped back into her brain. Hind claws on cats don't retract fully like the front claws. I guess this is something else to research. Great. Her tail lashed, and she startled, flying up from the ground in a single move to stare at her tail. Well, I guess I know why cats get startled. She lashed it experimentally a few times and nodded as she thought. Okay, Lots of experimenting and figuring out how much I want to share with the world, because they aren't going to let me be a private person anymore. And anything I can do to help stop some of the hate I'm seeing, just in what I've been exposed to, will be a good thing. Maybe Monday I can see this team and what we'll need to do. Wonder if they're anyone I know. McKenna shook her head, which felt decidedly different as a cat than as a human. She did it again, feeling her ears waggle a bit. Amusing. Right now, she didn't have anything else to do. So with a mental effort, she shifted. This time, it did feel like yoga. Assuming a position, slow, deep stretch, but right somehow. Standing in her bra and nothing else, she rolled her eyes at her own silliness. Picking up her discarded clothes, she tossed them in a hamper and dug for something else to wear. A pair of denim shorts and a tank top with a built-in bra sounded good right now. Pulling on the shorts, which were way shorter than anything she would ever wear in public, she paused as she zipped them up, easily. These had always been snug, but now they were buttoning with no effort. A full inch of space between her and her waist. McKenna blinked as she thought, and pulled her tank off, looking at her breasts in the mirror. They seemed firmer, higher, just different. She didn't spend a lot of time staring at her body. Usually she avoided mirrors with a passion. Why get reminded of your flaws? But this time, she looked. Then she went and got her phone. And after stripping again, she took a snapshot of herself, standing there naked from all the angles she could pull off. Another minute to lock it away in an app. She got dressed and headed back out to the kitchen. Dinner had started to smell good, but it still had a ways to go. Grabbing salsa and chips, she sat down in front of her laptop and started to research, eating as she went. She couldn't afford to not know anything at this point, and it looked like she had a kilt to order.